You've been told that peace comes from escaping, from leaving the city, turning off your phone, going somewhere quiet. But what if I told you the real noise isn't outside, it's inside? That even in silence, your mind keeps spinning. Worries about tomorrow, regrets from the past, and that tight feeling in your chest, it never really goes away. You try to breathe deep, but something still feels heavy. Here's the truth no one told you. Peace isn't found outside. It's built inside, not by running from your mind, but by understanding it. For thousands of years, Buddhist masters have passed down the tools, not beliefs, not dogmas, practices, real, practical ways to calm the mind, to open the heart, to find strength in stillness and beauty in impermanence. Tonight, you're not just falling asleep, you're beginning a journey inward, into the quiet corners of your soul, where clarity lives and peace isn't a dream. It's a choice. As you listen, you'll feel it. Your thoughts slowing, your breath deepening, your heart softening. By morning, something will be different. The noise will be quieter, the world lighter, and you stronger. This isn't just sleep. This is Buddhist wisdom, gently rewiring your heart and mind while you rest. Are you ready? Let's begin. What if the thoughts you trusted most were the very ones keeping you stuck? That quiet voice in your mind, the one that narrates your day, interprets events, warns you, judges you, questions everything. What if that voice was not your truth, but your prison? Not loud, not cruel, but relentless, predictable, familiar. And what if there was a way out? Zen Buddhism doesn't teach you how to think harder. It teaches you how to stop believing the thoughts that limit you. Not by fighting them, but by stepping beyond them entirely. And one of the most powerful ways it does this is through koans. A koan is not a riddle to be solved. It's a key, a small phrase, a question, a story, crafted not to explain, but to disrupt, to shake the very structure of your thinking mind until something breaks open, and what's left is clarity, silence, presence. Koans don't give you answers. They reveal that the answers you've been chasing were never the point. Let's look deeply into this practice, not from the outside, but from inside your own experience. Right now, as your mind settles, let's begin. Koans are simple in form: a sentence, a question, a scene between teacher and student. At first glance, they don't make sense. That's the point. They're designed to slip past the rational part of your brain, the part that tries to solve everything, and instead engage something deeper, your direct awareness. Take the famous one. What is the sound of one hand clapping? It doesn't have an answer, not a logical one, not a clever one. Any attempt to explain it leads nowhere, and that frustration, that mental block, is part of the medicine. You see, most of your thinking is a loop. Thought leads to reaction. Reaction leads to more thought. Over time, it forms grooves in your mind, patterns, beliefs. You don't even question them. They feel like you, but they aren't. Koans are like small explosions in that loop. When you sit with a koan, sincerely, without trying to outsmart it, your habitual thoughts begin to short-circuit. The mind stutters. And in that pause, that blank space, something remarkable happens. You become aware of awareness itself. That might sound abstract, but it's not. You stop being the person thinking and become the presence noticing the thinking. That shift, from identified thought to spacious witness, is what Zen calls awakening. Not an idea. A felt shift in how you experience reality. You're no longer trapped in the river, you're standing on the shore. The koan doesn't make that happen. It just shakes the system hard enough for it to collapse, even for a moment. And that moment changes everything. This is why koans aren't explained. In Zen, teachers don't say, "Here's what this koan means." They don't interpret. They wait for the student to experience the collapse, to taste the shift. Because understanding doesn't set you free. Experience does. Let's go deeper. There are thousands of koans. Some one-liners, others full dialogues. One of the oldest is, "A monk asked Joshu, 'Does a dog have Buddha nature?' Joshu replied, 'Mu.' That one word, mu, has been meditated on for centuries. It means no, but not in the way we usually think. In Zen, it's said that mu is not an answer. It's a gate. The student is told to sit with it, breathe with it, repeat it like a mantra, not to find meaning but to burn through illusion. The practice is intense. You sit with mu not for minutes, but for days, weeks. Every breath becomes mu. Every step, every heartbeat. The word saturates your being until it stops being a word and becomes a force. Until your entire mind collapses into it. And in that collapse, people report something extraordinary. Not an insight, but an unshakable silence. A peace that has no opposite. That's not mysticism, that's neurological disruption. Modern neuroscience has found that repetitive, non-logical focus, like koan meditation, changes the brain's default mode network. This is the network active when your mind wanders, when you self-reflect, when you judge, when you overthink. Koans interrupt that network. They lower activity in the regions associated with self-narrative and increase activity in areas related to sensory awareness. In simpler terms, they take you out of your head and into the present moment, deeply, lastingly. But here's the subtle power of a koan. It doesn't force the mind to stop. It exhausts it. You try to understand. You fail. You try again, you fail again. Eventually, the thinking mind gets tired. It drops the need to figure it out. And right then, when effort is gone, space opens. And in that space, awareness blooms. Not in the future, not in the past, but here, now. This is why koans are often practiced in silence, without guidance, in monasteries where students sit for hours facing walls. The external world fades, the inner world collapses. And from the ashes of that collapse rises something fresh, alive, free from narrative. You don't become someone new, you simply stop pretending to be someone you're not. Another powerful koan says, "If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him." It shocks you, doesn't it? But it's not violent. It's radical clarity. It means if you find yourself clinging to any idea, even the most sacred one, let it go. Even if it looks holy, even if it feels comforting. Because clinging is suffering. That includes beliefs about enlightenment, about who you are, about what should or shouldn't be. True awakening isn't built on ideas. It's found when all ideas fall away and what's left is unfiltered awareness. The kind you don't chase because it's already here. The kind that's been silently present behind every moment of your life. Koans don't give you that awareness. They remove what blocks you from seeing it. Now let's bring this to where you are. You don't need to live in a monastery to benefit from koans. You don't need a Zen master or a robe. You need only sincerity and willingness to sit in not knowing. That's rare. Most people want answers, fast ones, neat ones. But Zen invites you to sit with the mess, to let it burn without running. And that's why this practice is not easy, but it is real. Take this into your own life. Next time your thoughts spiral, when fear speaks or anxiety grabs you or the mind plays its usual game, don't try to fix it. Don't argue with it. Don't escape. Ask yourself a question you can't answer. Something like, who is hearing these thoughts? What was my original face before I was born? Where is the mind if it can't be seen? Ask sincerely. Then sit in the space the question creates. That space is where transformation begins. It's the space where the thinker disappears and awareness remains. That's not philosophy. That's freedom. You may begin to notice something strange. After sitting with koans for a while, your usual reactions feel slower, softer. The anger that used to flare up immediately now feels less automatic. The urge to defend, to argue, to control, they don't grip you like before. That's not magic. That's what happens when the mental grooves are softened. Koans dissolve your automatic programming. They don't give you new thoughts. They create space between thoughts. And that space is where peace lives. You'll also notice your sense of identity begins to shift. The story of me, with all its worries, ambitions, memories, and fears, begins to feel less solid. Still there, but less sticky. Not because you've erased yourself, but because you see clearly it was never as solid as you thought. The mind tells stories. Koans expose the storyteller. Eventually, even the question, who am I, begins to fall apart. Not into despair, but into openness, into stillness, into a kind of joy that doesn't depend on answers. Koans aren't meant to be understood. They're meant to be lived. They're fire, not furniture. You don't carry them around. You burn in them. You let them consume your false certainty. And in the ashes, discover a kind of knowing deeper than thought. A knowing that doesn't need to speak. And here's the most beautiful part. Over time, your entire life becomes the koan. Every moment is an invitation, every emotion a doorway, every conflict a mirror. You stop asking for things to make sense and start sensing the mystery that was always here. Not needing answers is the deepest answer of all. So tonight, as your body softens and your breath slows, let your mind soften too. Not by effort, but by surrender. Let go of the need to understand. Let go of the story that something's missing. If a thought comes, let it come. If confusion rises, welcome it. If silence stretches out, trust it. Sit with a question you can't solve. Let it echo inside you. Not to reach a conclusion, but to dissolve the illusion that you ever needed one. This is the power of koans, not in solving the puzzle, but in realizing you were never the puzzle to begin with. And now, with your mind quieter, your heart more open, and your awareness resting in itself, you're ready for what comes next. And once the mind stops grasping for answers, once even the idea of the self begins to loosen its grip, there comes a silence so vast it feels endless. But within that silence, there is sound. Not ordinary sound, not noise or chatter, something deeper, something ancient, chanting, not for performance, not for worship, not for entertainment, but as a direct technology to reach what words alone cannot touch. Because sound, real sound, speaks directly to what lies beneath thought. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain. It vibrates. It moves through bone, breath, tissue, memory, into the subconscious, into identity, into all the layers where suffering lives unseen. This is where we now go. In Buddhist practice, chanting is not background noise. It's not something nice to add. It is a core method of transformation. It is used with precision, like a surgeon's blade, except instead of cutting flesh, it cuts through illusion. Repetitive Pali and Tibetan chants are structured in a very specific way. Their sounds, syllables, and tones are not random. They are designed to bypass your cognitive filters, because you don't need to believe in the meaning of the words for them to work. What matters is vibration. When a chant is repeated over and over with full presence, it creates a frequency field. That field interacts with the nervous system, the breath, and the subtle energy body. It doesn't stimulate your usual thoughts. It slows them, reshapes them. Sometimes it silences them entirely. Think of the mind like a muddy lake. Your thoughts are the dirt stirred up by constant motion. A chant, when repeated without expectation, is like still water. Over time, the mud begins to settle. What's left is clear space. In this space, you don't become someone new. You just finally hear what's always been there. Many people who begin chanting experience a feeling they can't describe, a kind of warmth or stillness, or even grief rising to the surface. That's not a side effect. That is the process. Because stored emotion lives not only in thought, but in the body. And sound reaches the body in ways logic cannot. When you chant, the vibration travels through your skull, your jaw, your chest. It resonates in your cells. Each repetition acts like a tuning fork, realigning what's out of harmony. There's also a reason why certain chants are structured in ancient languages. Pali and Tibetan are vibrationally dense. The syllables hold power not because of what they mean in translation, but because of how they feel in the body. Chants like Om Mani Padme Hum or Gate Gate Parasam Gate Bodhi Svaha are multi-dimensional tools. They aren't affirmations. They don't reinforce identity. They dismantle it, gently, layer by layer. Let's go deeper. Modern research has shown that repetitive vocalizations like chanting slow the heart rate, reduce cortisol, and stimulate the vagus nerve, the body's relaxation switch. But beyond the physical effects, something subtler happens. The constant self-reference, the internal narrator, begins to quiet. Not because you force it to, but because the chant gives your awareness something else to anchor to. And this new anchor doesn't reinforce your story, it erases it. The ego structure, that sense of me as separate, as in control, as isolated, relies on repetition too. You think the same things every day, feel the same reactions, tell the same internal story. Chanting interrupts this pattern. Every chant is like a bell rung in a room full of smoke. The smoke doesn't vanish all at once, but slowly it begins to thin. You don't fix the ego, you stop feeding it. That's the brilliance of sonic practice. It doesn't demand you change your mind. It simply makes the old identity uncomfortable until it dissolves by itself. One of the most powerful things that happens through chanting is the surfacing of buried emotion. It may come out as tears, as body heat, as a subtle trembling in the spine. That is energy leaving the system, not because you processed it mentally, but because the sound dislodged it from your energetic memory. This is why many chanting practices are done with deep breath, upright posture, and eyes either gently closed or slightly open, to keep the body as a stable container for whatever arises. And here's what's truly profound. Chanting becomes a mirror. Over time, you begin to hear yourself differently. The sound of your voice, once ordinary, now carries depth. You begin to sense where it's coming from, not the throat, but deeper. Some call it the heart. Others call it the hara, the center below the navel. Whatever name you use, the point is the same. You begin chanting from presence, not from personality. And that shift reconditions the entire system. What used to be emotional reactivity becomes space. What used to be anxiety becomes grounded vibration. And the more you chant, the more your system learns to live at this frequency, not just during practice, but in daily life. Now something subtle begins to happen. You're no longer trying to feel calm. You simply chant, and calm becomes the byproduct. You're no longer trying to feel worthy. You chant, and the feeling of lack evaporates. Not because you convinced yourself you're enough, but because the chant dissolved the question entirely. In this way, sound does what self-help never can. It doesn't build a better mask. It removes the need for one. There's also a deeply relational dimension to chanting, especially when done in group practice. A group repeating sacred sounds creates a shared field, a resonance that links nervous systems. Breaths sync, heart rates align, identity begins to dissolve, not just as an individual, but collectively. In that space, competition, comparison, even the urge to be seen, all melt away. What's left is communion, not with people as personalities, but with being itself. Even when practiced alone, the chant connects you to something larger, a lineage, a thread of sound stretching back centuries. Your voice joins that thread, not as ego, but as offering, as continuity, as part of something timeless. And here's the beauty. You don't need to be good at chanting. You don't need a perfect voice. In fact, the more honest, unrefined, and heartfelt the chant, the more powerful it becomes. Because chanting is not about control. It's about surrender. You're not doing something to get a result. You're letting go into the sound and letting the sound work on you. Over time, something profound happens. You stop trying to change yourself. You simply chant, and the excess falls away. Not all at once, but rhythmically, like waves smoothing a stone. You'll notice subtle shifts. Emotional reactions soften, mental noise quiets. You don't react as fast. You listen more. You feel more rooted, because you're living from the vibration now, not from the narrative. There are also chants designed to invoke specific qualities: compassion, clarity, protection. These aren't magical words, they're vibrational alignments. By repeating them, your system entrains to that quality. For example, chanting the name of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, isn't worship. It's vibrational training. You're aligning your nervous system to the frequency of compassion itself, and over time, that frequency becomes your baseline. You respond to life with more tenderness. You judge less. You forgive faster, not because you try, but because the vibration has changed you. And perhaps most powerful of all, chanting teaches you to feel presence, not conceptually, but in your whole body. You don't have to think about being here. You resonate here. Even in silence, the chant echoes inside you. Your body hums, not with anxiety, not with striving, with stillness. That stillness is not empty. It is full of subtle warmth, full of presence, full of life without effort. And from that place, something begins to emerge. Not a new belief, but a new way of being. One that does not cling. One that does not fear silence. One that does not need to prove itself. You've heard that the ego fears silence. That's true. But chanting is silence made audible, and the ego doesn't know what to do with that. So it begins to unravel, gently, naturally, not through discipline, through resonance, through sound. And one day, as you chant, something may happen. You stop thinking, you stop even trying, and all that's left is vibration, no boundary, no you, just pure awareness moving as sound, not separate, not seeking, just being. And when the chant ends, you don't lose the feeling. It lingers, it permeates. The ego may return, yes, but now you know it's not permanent. Now you've tasted something deeper, and once you've heard the silence behind the sound, you'll never unhear it. So as you rest now, let your breath become the chant. Let your thoughts be met with vibration, not argument. Let your voice, even in silence, continue to echo from the deepest part of you. Let the chant continue, not as repetition, but as remembrance. The remembrance of who you are, beneath all stories. And once sound has cleared the noise, once chanting has softened the walls that kept you distant from yourself, something begins to rise, something raw, something real. Beneath the calm, emotion stirs. Not the surface tension of the day, but old currents, ancient echoes living deep in the body. Moments never fully felt, pain never fully processed, emotions once too overwhelming, now surfacing quietly. This isn't regression. This is release. Because the body remembers what the mind forgets. It holds grief in the jaw, fear in the stomach, shame in the chest. These feelings don't vanish with time. They wait, beneath posture, breath, heartbeat, until the right practice allows them to dissolve. Elemental meditation is that practice. Not visualizations, not distractions, but direct experience of the primal forces that form everything, including you. Earth, fire, water, air, space. Each element is not symbolic. It is alive in you. You are not separate from nature. You are nature expressing itself through form. These meditations don't add anything new. They reveal what is already here, and what has always been here, Start with earth, the feeling of weight, support, ground. This is the element that gives you structure, stability, boundaries. In meditation, connecting with earth means coming back to your physical body, to the sensation of sitting, of touching the ground. Many people who've experienced emotional trauma disconnect from the earth element. They float, they disassociate, they feel unrooted. Meditation on earth doesn't fix trauma. It brings the nervous system back to a place where it can feel safe again. You can feel this simply by resting awareness on the base of the spine, by noticing the contact between body and floor, by breathing into your legs and hips, inviting presence to settle. When you stay long enough with earth, the feeling of being supported begins to return. You don't have to do anything. The body starts to trust again. Then comes fire, heat, activation, movement. The part of you that digests not just food, but life experience. Fire governs anger, transformation, and clarity. When blocked, it creates coldness, fatigue, confusion. Meditation on fire is not about visualizing flames. It's about feeling energy, warming the center of the belly, noticing subtle heat build in the core, allowing suppressed emotion, especially anger, to rise without judgment. People often fear fire, but repressed fire turns inward and becomes shame. Properly held fire liberates. It gives you the energy to act, to set boundaries, to move forward. If during meditation the body begins to tremble, heat up, or feel waves of intensity, don't panic. That's fire doing its work. Let it rise. Let it burn what needs to leave. Then feel what remains. Water follows. Fluidity, emotion, memory. Water governs tears, empathy, and flow. It softens what fire brings to the surface. While fire liberates, water soothes. Many carry grief like a stone, heavy, unmoving. Meditation on water lets grief melt, not forced, just witnessed, often in silence, sometimes through tears. The body may sway as if rocked by inner currents. This is not breakdown. This is recalibration. To access water, place awareness in the pelvis, the area of flow and receptivity. Breathe slowly. Let go of control. Let the mind loosen its grip. Let feelings pass like waves, rising, cresting, falling away. There is no story here, no analysis. Only the gentle motion of what wants to move. Next comes air, lightness, breath, expansion. Air governs communication, openness, space between thoughts. People trapped in trauma often have constricted breathing, shallow, rapid, tight in the chest. Meditation on air is the medicine for that. Not deep forced breaths, but presence with breath as it is, letting it move naturally, noticing how breath enters through the nose, fills the lungs, and leaves, without effort. This simple awareness restores rhythm. It reconnects you with life, not as a concept, as sensation, as now. When air is balanced, the mind clears, the body feels spacious, anxiety softens. You don't need to fix your thoughts. You simply breathe, and thought begins to lose its urgency. Finally, there is space, the element without form, the one that holds everything and clings to nothing. Meditation on space is subtle. It's not visual. It's not physical. It's awareness, becoming aware of itself. You're no longer focusing on sensation or breath. You're resting in openness, in the silent field in which all other elements arise. When trauma dissolves into space, it stops defining you. It becomes energy, memory, movement, no longer identity. This space is not emptiness in the negative sense. It is spaciousness. It is the capacity to hold every feeling without being overwhelmed. The more time you spend in elemental presence, the more you understand something important. Healing is not a linear process. It's circular, rhythmic. Earth may support you today. Tomorrow, fire may rise. The day after, water may bring tears. This is not regression. It's deep work. And elemental meditation is the terrain through which that work unfolds, patiently, gently, consistently. One of the most powerful ways to practice is to combine elements in one sitting. Start grounded in earth to feel the body. Activate fire in the belly to awaken. Soften into water to release. Breathe into air to expand. Rest in space to integrate. Let each element teach you something. Earth teaches patience. Fire teaches courage. Water teaches surrender. Air teaches presence. Space teaches freedom. No emotion needs to be solved. It needs to be held, not in thought, but in elemental awareness. If sadness arises, where does it live? Does it feel heavy like earth, hot like fire, wet like water, tight like air? Or does it ask for more space? These questions don't require answers. They guide attention. And attention, without resistance, heals. Over time, you'll begin to feel your trauma not as a burden, but as sensation. It loses its charge. It stops defining your choices. You're no longer protecting old wounds. You're living from a new rhythm, one that flows with the elements, not against them. There is also a subtle intelligence in the body that gets activated through elemental meditation, a kind of deep knowing, not mental, somatic. This intelligence knows when to release, when to rest, when to open. You don't need to push, you need to listen. And the more you listen, the more you realize trauma is not your enemy. It's a part of you that froze, that held pain to keep you safe. Through the elements, you thaw, you soften, you allow that part of you to rejoin the whole. This is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole, not fixed, not changed, simply present, with all parts of yourself alive and included. Some may ask, how long does this take? How many sessions? How many weeks? But the body does not move by calendar, it moves by rhythm. Some shifts take years, others take moments. But every time you sit, every breath you bring to sensation, you are loosening the knot. You are teaching your system that it is safe to feel again, safe to be here. And when you walk through the world with that awareness, grounded, warm, open, clear, spacious, something changes. You listen more, react less. You hold boundaries without shutting down. You feel without collapsing. You move without rushing. You carry the elements with you, earth in your steps, fire in your presence, water in your eyes, air in your breath, space in your silence. You don't perform calm, you are calm, because nothing is stuck, nothing is hidden. The practice has done its work, quietly, deeply, So now, as you rest, let the body speak. Let the elements rise in whatever form they need. Don't try to label or fix. Just feel. Let what's frozen melt. Let what's heavy settle. Let what's tight expand. Let what's distant return. Let what's lost be welcomed. No need to rush. No need to understand. Just stay. The earth holds you. The fire warms you. The water softens you. The air opens you. The space frees you. Let that be enough. And when you're ready to move forward, something deeper will come with you. Not a story, not a scar, a stillness. One that remembers you are whole, you always were. And once the elements have softened the body, released the memory locked in the muscles, and returned the mind to stillness, something unexpected begins to open, a deeper sensitivity. Not just to yourself, to everything. A kind of quiet empathy that doesn't ask for attention, doesn't announce itself, but feels everything around it more fully. Trees, wind, small animals, even the space between sounds. All start to feel alive. This is not imagination. This is awareness expanding beyond the human center. Buddhist practice does not stop with inner calm. It continues outward, dissolving the idea that worth and awareness belong only to humans. The ego believes it is the center. It puts me at the top of the hierarchy, but meditation slowly undoes this illusion. It begins by turning attention inward, but as the identity softens, awareness begins to spread, not by will, but by nature. This is where non-human compassion begins. Not as a belief, not as sentiment, but as a direct experience that other forms of life, even the ones you overlook, also suffer, also feel, also carry the weight of existence in their own way. Traditional Buddhist teachings often begin with metta bhavana, the cultivation of loving kindness. This practice begins with offering goodwill to yourself, then others, then neutral people, and eventually enemies. But the deeper layers don't stop with people, they go beyond. Buddhist texts often include the line, "May all beings be free from suffering." All beings, not just friends, not just humans, beings with wings, with fur, with shells, with scales, beings that crawl, that swim, that live in the soil, even beings you cannot see. This isn't poetry, it's discipline. To sit in silence and actively generate warmth toward what your ego would normally ignore or reject. At first, it feels unnatural, maybe even strange. The mind will resist. It will say, "They're just animals. They're too small. They don't matter. They don't understand." But with sustained meditation, the resistance softens. You begin to feel differently. A spider no longer looks like a threat. A bird's cry is no longer background noise. Ants on the ground seem less like interruptions, more like neighbors. And when you feel that shift, even once, it stays with you. What's happening is simple. The boundary of self is expanding. The ego is no longer the edge. Compassion begins to include what was once invisible. The deeper the meditation practice goes, the more sensitive the system becomes. Not emotionally reactive, but open, clear, responsive. This is not weakness, it's refinement. To extend compassion beyond the human ego means to open your heart in ways that feel quiet, but radical. It doesn't require words. It doesn't need others to notice. It becomes part of your way of being. And here's the key. This extension is not driven by thought. It's not a moral checklist. It arises naturally when self-importance dissolves. When the thought, "I am more important than that creature," disappears, what's left is connection. In Buddhist cosmology, there are many types of beings: human, animal, hungry ghost, even gods. Not all visible, not all understandable through logic, but all seen as part of the same shared existence, all deserving of compassion. You don't need to believe in metaphysics to understand the point. The more open your awareness becomes, the more it touches everything it previously ignored. Even the smallest being, a fly buzzing near your ear, a beetle crossing the sidewalk, becomes worthy of kindness. And this kindness doesn't mean interference. It means awareness, a soft gaze, a silent wish, a decision not to harm, a willingness to see rather than dominate. Many people live with unconscious violence, not just in action, but in attitude. A quiet dismissal of anything that isn't useful, beautiful, or human. Meditation breaks that pattern by returning your senses to honesty. You begin to feel the presence of life in everything, in moss, in sunlight, in the cry of a night animal. This shifts your behavior, not out of guilt, out of clarity. You step more lightly. You pause before killing a bug. You notice how often your habits overlook other forms of life. This shift is not small. It changes everything. The ego likes to make things about itself. Even compassion can become performative. Look how kind I am. Look how much I care. But compassion beyond the human self is quieter. There's no audience, no applause, just presence. And this presence has no agenda. It doesn't help to feel good. It helps because help is needed. In many Buddhist rituals, monks chant for the well-being of beings they cannot see. This includes spirits, animals, beings in other realms. Not because they want something in return, but because compassion is not transactional. In your own practice, this can begin simply. Sitting in silence, breathing, and silently saying, "May all beings be safe. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings know peace." You don't need to direct it anywhere specific. Just let it flow outward. Let it pass through the walls of your home, beyond cities, into forests, across oceans. Your mind may say, "This does nothing," but energy moves where attention goes. The point isn't to save the world. The point is to stop closing your heart. Compassion becomes your default when judgment is no longer needed, and that includes compassion toward what you feared or disliked. Insects, rodents, even predators, not approval, presence. You begin to understand. Fear hardens the heart. Compassion softens it. This is not about becoming passive. It's about seeing clearly without aggression, without superiority, without the old filter of me first. The more you include in your compassion, the more you feel supported, because you are no longer cut off. You no longer feel like a separate self navigating a threatening world. You feel connected to a field of life that includes you, but is not limited to you. And from that connection, strength rises. Not the strength of control, the strength of openness. You start to feel that even silence has presence, that space is not empty, that the world is not inert. It's alive, watching, breathing, holding. This changes the way you speak, the way you touch, the way you rest. Your body begins to reflect this expanded awareness. Breath becomes more sensitive, your nervous system more calm. This is not philosophy. It's the nervous system relearning trust. Even the way you eat may change, not by rule, by reverence. You notice the life that made your food possible. Gratitude comes unforced. You also stop taking everything so personally. If someone is rude, you don't feel the need to defend. You start seeing behavior as part of conditioning, not essence. If you can feel compassion for a stray dog or a spider, you can feel it for a stranger, even for someone who acts with ignorance. Compassion is not approval. It is understanding that suffering leads to suffering, and kindness breaks the chain. You don't need to agree with everyone, but you no longer need to harden against them. This extension of compassion builds resilience, because when you're no longer constantly protecting the self, your energy frees up. You feel more available, more whole. This doesn't mean you never get angry or tired. It means those states no longer dominate you. You feel them. Let them pass. Stay open. And the more open you stay, the more the world opens with you. You begin to sense that even the trees respond to presence, that animals look at you differently, that space itself feels softer around you, because what you offer is what you live inside. Meditation teaches this not through belief, but through direct contact. Each time you sit and offer compassion beyond your human concerns, you expand the field of being. This is what Buddhism means when it speaks of bodhisattvas, beings who dedicate their awareness to the well-being of all life, not to become saints, but because the boundaries of ego no longer make sense. When compassion becomes boundless, peace follows, not because life becomes easy, but because resistance dissolves. You walk through the world not above anything, but with everything. This is not perfection. This is participation. And in this participation, healing deepens. Because now, even when you feel lost, you know you're not alone. You're part of something greater than fear, greater than self. And from that place, the heart can finally rest. So now, as you breathe quietly, let that compassion extend. No need to try, just feel. Let it move beyond the body, beyond walls, beyond species. No words needed, just presence and trust. Something ancient is listening. And when compassion finally expands beyond the human form, when the boundaries of self dissolve into something wide, soft, and clear, another truth quietly begins to rise. The mind is not just in the head. It moves, it breathes, it weaves through the body, through sensation, through feeling. Thought is not only shaped by belief, but by energy. If the system is blocked, the mind is rigid. If the system flows, thought becomes light, adaptable, calm. This isn't metaphor, it's structure. In Buddhist systems, especially those rooted in Vajrayana, there is deep knowledge about this inner architecture. A body within the body, not visible under skin, not found on medical charts, but experienced directly in practice. A network of energy channels called nadis in Sanskrit or tassa in Tibetan. These are not physical nerves. They are subtle pathways where energy moves, where breath and mind meet. They shape the way you think, feel, and perceive. When these channels are clear, attention becomes flexible. When they are blocked, the same thoughts repeat, the same emotions loop, the same reactions feel inescapable. You may feel mentally trapped, But the real trap is energetic. Clear the block, and thought changes on its own. This is why Vajrayana teachings often focus not just on what you believe, but on how energy is moving in the body. Mental health is not separate from energetic hygiene. The state of your channels influences the state of your mind. There are 3 primary channels in many Buddhist subtle body maps. One on the left, one on the right, and one central. They begin at the base of the spine and move upward to the crown. The left is often associated with emotion and the lunar current. The right is connected to action and solar energy. The central channel, called the Avaduti or Uma, is where deep balance and stillness arise. When the left and right channels dominate, your mind flips between emotion and reaction, between craving and aversion, between fear and force. This creates mental rigidity. You grip, you resist, you push and pull. The mind becomes hard. But when energy enters the central channel, the movement stops. Not the breath, not the body, the grasping. Attention settles. Thought slows. A calm, bright awareness emerges. Not blank, not passive, clear. Practices that support this shift are not abstract. They are methodical. They involve posture, breath, gaze, visualization, and sometimes sound. One of the most foundational is breath retention with awareness at specific points in the body. Not to control the breath, but to guide energy into the central channel. For example, by focusing on the space just below the navel while breathing gently and steadily, energy begins to pool there. If you do this without tension, the mind starts to stabilize, not by force, by structure. When the system is balanced, even difficult thoughts feel spacious. They rise and pass. They don't stick. In Tibetan texts, it is said that the mind rides the wind. Lung sem yerme. Wind and mind are inseparable. That means your thoughts move with your inner currents. If the winds are chaotic, the mind is scattered. If the winds are still, the mind is quiet. This is not poetic language. It is a lived experience. And the reason meditation often feels difficult is because the winds are not trained. They're stuck. They move in crooked patterns. This is where energetic hygiene becomes essential. You can sit in perfect posture with deep philosophy, but if your channels are tight, your mind will not settle. Training the subtle body means working with that energy, not forcing, not blocking, but aligning it. In traditional practice, yogic breathing is used not for strength, but for purification. Breathing in specific sequences, retaining for short moments, exhaling slowly, visualizing energy moving through the body. Each of these techniques is designed to create balance between the left and right channels and open the center. When the central channel becomes the main pathway for energy, the experience of meditation deepens quickly. You may feel warmth at the spine, brightness behind the eyes, a hum in the heart. But more important than sensation is the effect on the mind. You start to notice gaps between thoughts. Emotions arise and dissolve without crashing. Attention doesn't fight, it rests. And this resting is not dull, it's full of presence. The more you train this way, the more stable the experience becomes. You don't have to escape life to feel peace, you carry it inside your system. There are also points in the subtle body called chakras, though this term varies in meaning across traditions. In many Buddhist systems, these are considered energy hubs where channels meet. They are not places to believe in, they are places to feel. Each point holds different psychological qualities. The throat for communication, the heart for connection, the solar center for will. When these areas are open, the mind reflects their clarity. When blocked, mental patterns twist. For example, when the heart center is tight, trust is difficult, compassion feels far, but when it opens, there's a natural warmth, not sentimental, but stable. These openings don't come from affirmations, they come from awareness directed inward, from consistency, from subtle practices that cleanse the system. Over time, practitioners begin to feel their body as more space than structure. Energy flows without friction, breath feels full, thought becomes less intrusive. You're not numbing anything, you're including everything, with ease. This level of energetic awareness also sharpens perception. You begin to notice subtle shifts in others. You feel tension before it's spoken. You sense emotional currents not as threats, but as signals. This sensitivity is not weakness, it's attunement. When your own channels are open, your nervous system doesn't absorb other people's chaos. It sees it, allows it, moves around it. This is why advanced practitioners often feel deeply grounded, not because they're emotionless, but because their system doesn't cling to every impulse. Training the subtle body also supports deep emotional digestion. When energy moves properly, old patterns rise and pass without resistance. That tightness in your throat, the heaviness in your stomach, those are not random. They are places where breath stopped moving, where the mind held something too painful to feel. Through subtle body work, those places begin to loosen. Not all at once, gradually, gently. And as they open, mental resilience builds, because you're not escaping discomfort, you're learning to hold it with space. Over time, your system doesn't react the same way to stress. You don't feel hijacked by emotion. Your thoughts don't spiral. You remain clear even in conflict. This isn't willpower, it's architecture. Your energy moves, your breath flows, your mind reflects that fluidity. What was once a rigid self becomes a responsive presence. The structure that once felt like you, tight, defined, reactive, dissolves. What remains is presence, flexible, awake. And in that presence, life feels different, not because it changed, because the lens through which you meet it did. This is the gift of subtle body practice, not escape. Integration. A body that holds energy clearly, a breath that moves freely, a mind that reflects reality without distortion. So now, as you rest, let your awareness feel the body from the inside, not to analyze, to listen. Where does breath stop? Where does sensation resist? Where does stillness feel close? You don't need to change anything. Just stay present. The system already knows how to heal. Your job is to stop interrupting it. Let breath move, let energy flow, let space widen, and with each moment of attention the channels open, not with noise, with silence, not with effort, with alignment. And the mind becomes what it always wanted to be, open, light, and free. And as the energy body opens and the mind settles into stillness, a deeper question quietly arrives. What remains after all of this ends? If the breath stops, if the body breaks down, if everything once familiar fades, what is left? Not just in theory, in practice. What happens when you stop looking away from death and turn toward it? not with fear, but with clarity. In Theravada Buddhism, there is a meditation rarely spoken about outside traditional monastic settings. It is not gentle, it does not comfort, it demands full honesty. It's known as cemetery contemplation, a practice of visualizing the decay of the human body, flesh rotting, bones bleaching, organs collapsing, a body once loved, touched, protected, returning to dust. To modern minds, this sounds extreme, but to those who practice it, this contemplation is not morbid. It is liberating, not symbolic, but direct. It cuts through illusion at the root. The core of this practice is not fascination with death, it's freedom from attachment. Fear arises when the mind clings to youth, to appearance, to control, to permanence. But when you stare directly at the truth of impermanence, the clinging starts to dissolve. The Buddha himself gave detailed instructions for this. He described 9 stages of decomposition. Practitioners would visit charnel grounds, sit near corpses, and meditate on each stage, watching skin turn grey, blood dry, muscles separate, insects gather. Nothing was hidden, nothing romanticized, just raw nature, unfolding without denial. Today, this is adapted through visualization, a mental process of seeing one's own body, not someone else's, going through those same stages. Not out of punishment, but to wake up, to pierce through vanity, to release the deep anxiety of losing what was never truly yours to begin with. This kind of meditation doesn't numb you. It softens the fear around what is already happening. Your body is aging. Cells die and renew. No thought, no diet, no belief can stop this. Contemplating death is not about adding fear. It is about removing the illusion that avoidance brings peace. Avoidance fuels anxiety. Direct seeing dissolves it. As you visualize the body breaking down, something profound happens. Your identity, so often tied to appearance, begins to loosen. You see that you are not the skin, not the smile, not the shape. You are the one watching change unfold, the one who remains silent and unmoved. This realization doesn't make you cold. It makes you honest. Suddenly, other people's bodies lose their false power over you. Attraction, envy, disgust, they all begin to shift. You understand that everyone you see is walking toward the same disintegration. That insight humbles you, softens you, it erases the sharp line between you and them. In this way, cemetery contemplation is a deep form of compassion. Not sentimental, real. You no longer pretend anyone escapes suffering. And in that, you begin to respond to others not from judgment, but from shared fragility. This doesn't make life meaningless, it makes it urgent. It strips away distraction. You no longer spend weeks chasing things that don't matter. You stop holding grudges over small insults. You see how short this all is, how precious, how easily it slips away. When you hold that knowledge, not as thought, but as lived recognition, your nervous system stops grasping. You breathe more fully. You don't rush. You stop needing to prove anything. Even ambition softens, not because you give up, but because you stop confusing success with safety. Safety was never in control. Safety is in awareness. Cemetery contemplations also untie the knot of fear surrounding death itself. Most people carry subtle dread, not just of dying, but of disappearing, of being forgotten, of not existing. But when you sit with death, see it clearly, feel it move through your imagination without resistance, the dread begins to fade. Death becomes natural, not a punishment, but a process, like leaves falling, like rivers drying up. It's not personal, it's pattern. And when that understanding enters your body, not just your thoughts, something lets go. You stop trying to keep everything perfect. You stop fearing mistakes. You start living from a deeper rhythm. There's also something uniquely clarifying about visualizing your own death. You realize what matters, not hypothetically, tangibly. You begin to ask, if today were my last, where would my mind go? Would I regret? Would I blame? Would I withhold love? These questions stop being philosophy. They become action. You speak more honestly. You forgive faster. You listen more carefully. Because you've trained the mind to see what most run from. And that training leaves an imprint. It also brings peace in difficult times. When others die, or when sickness comes, your mind doesn't spin in panic. It stays steady, not from detachment, from readiness. You've sat with this, you've prepared, you've looked into the mirror and not turned away. That readiness also brings dignity. You begin to treat others with more depth. You value the presence of those around you more. You don't waste time in shallow interactions. You feel the weight of this brief existence and respond with respect. Cemetery contemplation also disrupts ego inflation. It cuts through the belief that you are immune, exceptional, untouchable. This is not humiliation. It is honesty. No one escapes decay, not saints, not geniuses, not you. And when you embrace that, you start focusing on what truly matters, the quality of your awareness, the way you treat others, the depth of your presence, because everything else is going. This practice also helps when facing sickness. If you fall ill and the body begins to weaken, the training supports you. Instead of panic, there is acceptance. Instead of despair, there is clarity. You've already rehearsed this, not to give up, to let go. Some people think meditation is about escaping reality, but cemetery contemplation proves the opposite. It's about entering reality so fully that even death loses its edge. In monastic training, young monks often spend months with this practice. They don't rush through it. They allow each stage of decay to become part of their memory. Skin loosening, tendons separating, skulls cracking. It's not obsession, it's purification. Because after seeing your own death so clearly, trivial worries dissolve. You realize you don't have time for pettiness. You don't need to waste your life defending pride. You'd rather be kind than right. You'd rather be aware than busy. And that shift affects every relationship. You become more present with others. You let go of needing to control how people see you. You stop performing. Because death strips all costumes. And you've already seen that. This isn't about living with fear. It's about living with focus. When you train the mind to stay steady in the face of decay, you train it to be free. Nothing can shake it. Not loss, not change, not uncertainty. Because you've faced the deepest one, the end, and found presence there too. Over time, the cemetery practice becomes more than a meditation. It becomes a lens. You walk through life seeing its fragility, not in a morbid way, in a grateful one. You take less for granted. A friend's laughter, a warm meal, a quiet morning. These are not background anymore. They are miracles. You treat them that way. The final result of this practice is a kind of courage, not dramatic, quiet. A courage that stays with you when things fall apart, when plans break, when people leave. You don't collapse. You remain still, not because you are strong, because you are surrendered. You've stopped trying to hold what can't be held. And in that surrender, there is peace deeper than control. So now, let your breath return to your body. Let the silence settle again, and feel the weight of this moment, not as burden, but as invitation. Nothing is permanent, but awareness is always here. Stay with it. Let go of the rest. And when you've looked directly into the end, when the mind has rested in decay without resistance, when fear loses its shape and identity softens under the weight of impermanence, what rises next is not despair, but space. A vast inner space, quiet but ready. And from that space, the question begins to form. If everything you clung to was never truly yours, then what now defines you? Who are you when nothing remains to protect? This is where the next layer of practice begins, not with emptiness, but with form arising from emptiness, not with identity as ego, but as intention. This is the gateway to deity yoga. In Tibetan Buddhism, deity yoga is not about worship. It's not about bowing down to gods or external beings. It's about stepping into qualities so fully that the separation between self and symbol dissolves. You don't believe in green Tara. You become her. You don't ask Vajrapani for courage. You embody it through him. The visualization is not fantasy. It's a tool to restructure the mind at its roots. Most of the time, identity is formed passively, through memory, conditioning, culture, reaction. You become what you're told, what you fear, what you've repeated. Deity yoga reverses that. It gives you a conscious pattern to inhabit, not to escape who you are, but to reveal what's possible within you. Visualization becomes the method. You hold the image of a specific deity, not outside you, but in your heart, in your breath, in your body. You study their posture, their color, their expression, not because it's exotic, but because each detail holds symbolic meaning tied to your mind. Green Tara, for example, represents swift compassion. She's not passive. Her right leg is extended, ready to move toward suffering without hesitation. She's surrounded by lotus blossoms, symbols of wisdom that bloom from mud. Her gaze is direct, alert. When you sit with her image, you don't just see a figure. You begin to feel what it means to respond to pain, not with panic, but with fearless love. This isn't pretending, it's training. Just like repeating anger makes you more reactive, repeating courage reshapes your nervous system. When you visualize Tara, recite her mantra, and breathe with her form, you are not escaping pain. You are expanding your response to it. In the same way, Vajrapani is the protector, the embodiment of strength. Muscular, fierce, wrapped in flames, not to attack, but to burn through illusion, to cut what binds the mind. His image is fierce because he holds the energy many are taught to suppress. Anger, force, power. But in deity yoga, you don't deny these energies. You learn to channel them. Vajrapani teaches you to hold that fire with awareness, to transform it into clarity and action. Each deity is an archetype, a mirror, a map. You don't pray to them as something above you. You call them forward as something already seeded inside you. And through repetition, that seed starts to grow. This is why visualization is not just imagination, it's embodiment. You bring the form into your mind and into your breath until the boundary dissolves. You feel the deity's qualities as your own. Over time, those qualities become default. Confidence becomes natural. Compassion becomes the first response, not the last. The process involves many layers. There's outer visualization, where you see the deity in front of you. Inner visualization, where the deity appears at your heart. And secret visualization, where you realize the deity was never separate from you, that every mantra you've spoken, every image you've held, was a reflection of your own mind waking up. The mantras are not spells. They are vibrational codes designed to shift your frequency. Repeating them while visualizing the deity builds neural and energetic pathways in the body-mind system. You begin to feel the resonance of the mantra, not just as sound, but as presence. When done consistently, this practice has psychological effects. It brings emotional resilience, sharper focus, greater patience. Not because you force these traits, but because you've spent time inside the template that holds them. Deity yoga gives your nervous system a new pattern to stabilize around, a higher frequency to return to. This process also heals internal division. Many carry unconscious shame, buried anger, unmet grief. These energies, when left unacknowledged, become blocks. Deity practice brings them into the light, not to suppress, but to integrate. You see that Tara doesn't reject fear. She meets it. Vajrapani doesn't destroy anger. He uses it to destroy ignorance. And slowly, you begin to relate to your own pain differently. You stop hiding from your shadow. You bring it to the altar, into the visualization, into the mantra. You sit with it, breathe with it, transform it. You also start to understand that these practices were never meant to be distant or abstract. They were designed for minds like yours, confused, distracted, tired. The deities are not distant gods. They are expressions of awakened mind, and they invite you to remember that you carry that same capacity. When challenges arise in daily life, the effects become noticeable. You react slower, you judge less, you sense strength when fear tries to rise, because you've rehearsed. You've met yourself in forms larger than your fear. This builds a kind of psychological immunity. Not resistance to feeling, but protection from drowning in reaction. A stable self, built not on ego, but on clarity. Over time, the practice deepens. Visualization becomes easier. Mantra becomes automatic. The deity's qualities start appearing in your behavior without thought, not as an act, as presence. And then something subtle happens. You stop needing the form. You stop needing the image. The qualities remain. The outer becomes inner. The inner becomes seamless. You move through the world not as a character in search of validation, but as a field of awareness responding with wisdom and strength. Deity yoga does not eliminate the self. It refines it. It gives it shape without solidifying it. And this is the paradox. By becoming something greater, you realize you were never separate from it. In advanced stages, the visualization dissolves entirely into light. The body of the deity dissolves into your body. The form dissolves into formlessness, and what's left is radiant clarity, vast and still. But even before that stage, the benefits are profound. Greater self-regulation, deeper empathy, a quieter mind, a clearer sense of purpose. This is not fantasy. This is applied inner work. It teaches you that strength is not just the absence of fear, it's the ability to act in its presence. Compassion is not just softness, it is precision. Mantra is not just repetition, it is rhythm that carries memory. Visualization is not escape. It is entry into dimensions of your own being you've forgotten to trust. So now, as you breathe quietly, let your mind remain open, not as a blank screen, but as a mirror, ready to reflect something higher, ready to take shape, ready to remember the qualities already sleeping within. You don't have to be Tara or Vajrapani, but their qualities can become yours. And the longer you stay with them, the more the lines fade, until one day, without effort, you find yourself moving through life, not seeking power, but embodying peace, not pretending strength, but radiating it, not asking for love, but offering it, not becoming someone else, but remembering who you are when fear no longer speaks louder than truth. And when the deity dissolves into light, when the qualities once separate are fully lived from within, a different question begins to arise. Not who am I, but where am I? Not just physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. The awareness that once flowed in one direction now turns to see itself moving across layers, high, low, dense, open. In Buddhist practice, this is not a metaphor. It is a map not of places, but of mind states. This is where Buddhist cosmology enters, not as belief, but as a guide to resilience. The 31 realms described in Buddhist teaching are not locations you find in outer space. They are reflections of inner space, mental and emotional states made visible through narrative form. The point is not to convince the mind that these places exist outside of experience. The point is to show how often you visit them already. Each realm represents a quality of consciousness, some light, clear and refined, others heavy, reactive, contracted. You move through these realms not with your body, but with your mind. Every mood, every emotion, every thought pattern can be seen as a visit to one of these levels. Understanding this changes how you relate to your experience. You stop taking emotional states personally. You stop believing that a single moment defines your worth. You start to see moods as weather, impermanent, patterned, able to be observed and released. For example, the hell realms represent extreme suffering, anger, despair. When you're consumed by rage, you are not simply angry, you are in the hell realm. The flames are real, not in the outside world, but in your nervous system. Your body heats up, your breath shortens, vision narrows. That's not abstraction, that's physiology. But Buddhist cosmology doesn't judge this. It shows that even this realm, even this pain, is part of the map. And more importantly, it's not fixed. You can move. With awareness, with practice, with presence, the mind begins to shift its location. The hungry ghost realm is another powerful example. It describes the state of craving, insatiable wanting, always reaching, never satisfied. When caught in comparison, addiction, or obsessive desire, the mind enters this realm. And in that state, no amount of getting will relieve the emptiness, not because something's wrong with you, but because the craving is the realm itself. The grasping is the suffering. To recognize this brings power. You stop fueling the hunger. You step back and see, this is not who I am. This is where my mind is. And once you can see the place, you can begin to leave it. Then there are the animal realms, linked with ignorance, instinct, habitual behavior. When you're stuck in reaction, refusing to reflect, numbing out through routine, the animal mind is present. Not wrong, just unaware. The practice here is to become conscious of unconsciousness, to bring light into repetition, to gently guide the mind back into reflection without shame. One of the most deceptive realms is the realm of the gods, states of pleasure, success, praise, comfort. These seem like ideal places, but the teachings are clear. Even the highest realms are impermanent. Joy that depends on conditions eventually fades. The gods forget to practice. They enjoy, but they don't develop. When those realms collapse, they fall harder. Awareness that clings to pleasure becomes soft, unprepared for loss. That is the message of Buddhist cosmology. It prepares the mind for all states. It shows that suffering is not punishment, and joy is not proof of arrival. Both are parts of the journey. Neither are permanent. Your value isn't tied to which realm you are in. Your freedom depends on your awareness within the realm. Mental resilience comes from this understanding. You no longer chase or resist your experience. You navigate it. You notice when you enter the realm of jealousy, tight chest, sharp thoughts, restless energy. You don't deny it. You don't feed it. You name it. Breathe with it. Move through it. This is not a denial of complexity. It's a deep acceptance of how layered the mind is. Even within a single hour, you may move from a lower realm to a higher one, from fear to stillness, from confusion to insight. The journey is never linear. The cosmological model teaches you to track this movement, to see your triggers as doorways, your reactions as signposts, your habits as maps. Nothing is wasted. Every state is usable. It also helps in relationships. You stop taking others' behavior as their essence. You see that when someone lashes out, they are caught in a realm, not evil, not broken, just suffering, just unaware. And this recognition invites compassion, not as softness, but as clarity. It doesn't mean you allow harm. It means you don't meet confusion with more confusion. You meet it with grounded presence. You meet it with steadiness that doesn't fall into the same realm. This map becomes especially useful during practice. When you sit and the mind fills with restlessness, craving, boredom, that's not failure. That's movement. The hungry ghost is present, or the animal realm, or the human one, so full of thought and striving. You don't need to push them away. You meet them, you name them, you sit through them. And when calm arises, when the breath deepens and awareness stabilizes, you don't cling. You recognize the divine realm. You enjoy it, but you stay rooted. You keep practicing. This balance builds a deep kind of stability. not the kind that needs conditions to be right, the kind that moves with the shifting landscape without losing itself. And this is the deeper teaching. You are not the realm. You are the traveler. The more you recognize this, the less power each emotional state has over you. You stop building identities around temporary moods. You develop emotional elasticity, the ability to feel fully without becoming the feeling. This flexibility doesn't come from suppressing emotion. It comes from naming your state without judgment, from locating your mind without reacting. Awareness becomes the steady ground, no matter where the rest of your experience moves. And as the practice deepens, you begin to feel the realm before the thought even arrives. A sensation in the gut, a tension in the throat, a heat in the back of the neck. These are not problems, they are early signs, invitations to stay conscious. You start to see patterns, how certain events trigger certain realms, how stress invites craving, how praise awakens pride, how conflict stirs aggression. This insight turns your life into a living meditation. The classroom never ends. This map is not used to bypass. It's used to return, to drop deeper into presence every time the mind tries to escape through reaction, through distraction, through collapse. Even the realm of the Titans, those constantly fighting to climb higher, teaches something. It reveals how competition rooted in insecurity breeds suffering. You see it in yourself when others succeed and you feel threatened. You see it in others when praise becomes pressure. And instead of getting caught in the battle, you breathe. You step out. Not every moment offers resolution, but every moment offers awareness. And that awareness, practiced over time, becomes resilience, not because you're tougher, but because you're freer. The 31 realms are not fantasy. They are reflections of lived experience. They are tools for recognition. They expand your understanding of what it means to be human, to suffer, to grow, to return again and again to clarity. And eventually, you don't need to know which realm you're in. You just stay present. You breathe through the storm. You walk through the fog. You sit through the fire. And you trust that awareness itself is the home beneath it all. So now, return to your breath. Let the map settle into the background. Let this moment be what it is. Without escape, without grasping. You are not lost. You are just passing through. And when you begin to see the mind as a traveler, when each emotional state is recognized not as identity, but as location, there comes a moment where you ask, how do I return to center? Not as a concept, as an experience. When awareness moves through high and low, through ease and confusion, is there a structure that holds it steady? Something silent and balanced, something that doesn't react, just holds. This is where the practice of mandala begins, not as art, but as architecture of the mind. Mandala means circle, but its meaning is far wider. In Buddhist tradition, a mandala is a sacred map. It represents the structure of reality itself, both external and internal. It reflects how awareness can be arranged, purified, focused, not through control, but through symmetry, through proportion, through stillness formed with shape. In a chaotic mind, thoughts run in spirals. They scatter, push, pull. Attention is like a flickering flame. The mandala does the opposite. It gathers, it aligns, it teaches the nervous system to rest through pattern. This is not a visual meditation alone. The shapes, colors, and layers of a mandala are not decorative. They correspond to elements in consciousness. Outer circles represent boundaries, protection. Inner squares symbolize foundation. Central points hold stillness. Each line is intentional. Each direction represents a movement of energy, a psychological shift, a spiritual principle. When you look at a mandala, not casually but with awareness, the mind is drawn in. Not forcefully, gently. The symmetry pulls thought toward the center, not through logic but through resonance. The geometry becomes a mirror. Your thoughts begin to reflect its balance. For practitioners, creating or meditating on a mandala becomes a form of internal training, not in thinking, but in perceiving. You learn to hold structure without rigidity. You see that order doesn't limit you, it frees you from mental clutter. Each quadrant in a mandala may represent different states: wisdom, compassion, strength, clarity. As you move awareness across the visual form, those qualities awaken. The eyes feed the mind. The mind reorganizes itself. This is why Tibetan monks spend weeks creating mandalas from colored sand, not for display, for discipline, for purification, for remembrance. Each grain placed by hand, in silence, in devotion. The act itself is meditation. Attention is sharpened. Ego softens. The body, breath, and mind become one movement. And when it's finished, they destroy it. Always, without exception, not to erase effort, but to teach that even sacred order is impermanent. Beauty arises, holds, dissolves. What stays is not the form, it's the imprint, the training. That imprint stays in the nervous system. The more time spent with the mandala, the more naturally the mind begins to seek coherence. Clarity stops feeling distant. It becomes familiar. Mandala practice also improves concentration, not by resisting distraction, by giving the mind something to fully rest in. A single center, a layered structure, a stable field. Distraction loses power when attention is fully held by design. Over time, your way of seeing changes. You begin to notice symmetry everywhere, in nature, in sound, in relationship. You begin to feel when your thoughts are unbalanced, not in content, but in rhythm. You notice when emotion is loud but unstructured. You return to breath, to center. The mandala teaches you to pause. It also heals fragmentation. Many people live split, part of the mind in memory, part in worry, part in image. The mandala reweaves attention. It draws all parts inward, not to collapse, but to unify. This is especially powerful in trauma work. Trauma fragments perception. The body holds tension. Thought becomes chaotic. The nervous system can't find rhythm. Mandala practice restores rhythm, slowly, gently. It doesn't demand change. It offers form. The form allows safety. Within safety, release begins. The shapes are not arbitrary. Circles invite wholeness. Squares offer support. Lotuses open inward. Triangles point to transformation. Each symbol trains attention. Each line becomes a breath. The gaze softens. The mind slows. Even the colors hold meaning. Blue for clarity, white for purity, red for vitality, green for compassion, yellow for groundedness. These aren't rules, they are frequencies. You begin to feel their effect, not intellectually, but energetically. Meditation on mandalas is not analysis, it's presence. You let the form teach you. You don't interpret. You absorb. You let it speak to the body. And when you close your eyes, the shape remains. The internal structure echoes. You see its center. You feel its stillness. Thought passes, but doesn't grip. Emotion arises, but doesn't flood. There is space, order, silence. Some mandalas include deities at the center. These are not figures to worship, but qualities to awaken. Just as deity yoga dissolves separation between self and symbol, mandala practice makes qualities spatial. You don't become the center, you return to it, and from there you respond to life. This practice also teaches boundaries, not as walls, but as circles of awareness. What do you allow in? What do you hold close? What do you protect? The outer circles teach you how to contain your energy, to stop scattering, to remain aligned. This alignment affects behavior. You start to speak with more intention, move with more care, think with more focus, not from force, from balance. The mandala reflects the deepest law of inner life. Form holds freedom. Just as a river flows because of its banks, the mind flows when held in structure. Chaos is not creativity. Structure is not confinement. When held together, they become clarity. This clarity leads to mental spaciousness, a sense that even when things are difficult, there is room. You are not trapped in reaction. You see the pattern. You sit in the middle. You move from stillness. Mandala practice also supports other forms of meditation. It trains you to recognize center, to return to it, to stay with it through distraction. Even when the form is no longer present, the habit remains. The more you train, the more your mind becomes like a mandala, layered, balanced, luminous, impermanent. You stop chasing experience. You rest in structure. You move with awareness. This doesn't make life predictable. It makes your response stable. Even when the external world moves in patterns you can't control, the internal world remains ordered. You carry the mandala within you, and in that center, you are never lost. So now let the shapes fade, let the colors dissolve, let your breath be the circle, let awareness hold the symmetry. Nothing to add, nothing to remove. Only the quiet pattern of presence, opening and returning, again and again, to stillness. And when the structure has settled, when the mandala dissolves into the body like breath into silence, clarity begins to show you something else, something hidden, something constant. Patterns, thought cycles, emotional echoes, recurring movements of the mind that repeat not once, but endlessly. They rise the same way, feel the same way, end the same way, and they feel real, not because they're true, but because they're familiar. This is the engine of samsara. In Buddhist teachings, samsara is often described as the cycle of birth and death, but its meaning runs deeper than the physical. Samsara is the endless loop of mental formations, the constant recycling of desire, fear, opinion, identity. It is not one thing, it is repetition, not only across lifetimes, but moment to moment, thought to thought. To see samsara clearly is to see how your mind runs a script. Not because you chose it, because it was installed through memory, reaction, survival. The script has one job: continue itself, even if it brings suffering. This script is algorithmic, a chain of cause and effect. Something happens, you feel a sensation. That sensation triggers thought. That thought triggers emotion. That emotion leads to action. The action creates new conditions, and the loop starts again. You don't suffer because of one thought. You suffer because you loop, not once, daily, hourly, without seeing it. Insight meditation exists to interrupt the loop, not by force, by observation, not by changing the content, by watching the pattern. When you sit in meditation and the same thought appears again, judgment, regret, craving, you have a choice. You can follow it or you can observe it. When you observe it without engaging, something new happens. The loop hesitates, it loses momentum. This moment of awareness is the break. The algorithm doesn't know how to continue when you don't react. It depends on reaction. It feeds on your unconscious agreement. Insight meditation teaches the mind to see clearly, to witness the pattern forming without becoming part of it. You notice the arising of thought. You feel the body respond, but you don't move. You don't suppress. You stay. In this stillness, the thought cannot complete its usual circuit. It rises, but it fades. It tries to return, but you've seen it. And that seeing breaks the trance. Samsara is trance. Not one spell, millions of micro-spells, loops within loops. They are subtle. They come with your name, your habits, your likes and dislikes. They look like you, but they're not you. They are constructs, programs, created long ago, reinforced every time you follow without question. When you sit with awareness, you begin to sense the structure of these loops. You feel how each craving has a story, each fear has a familiar voice. The mind isn't generating something new, it's recycling. Recycling pain, recycling judgment, recycling identity. And here is the key. Nothing changes until you stop reacting, not suppressing, not fixing, stopping the reaction, watching the impulse rise and pass without moving toward or away. In that space, the loop doesn't end. It loses power. One of the most powerful insights in Buddhism is that what you resist strengthens, what you observe weakens. Because resistance is also energy. When you push against a loop, it tightens. When you watch it, it loses form. This is the heart of insight meditation, not focusing on an object, but turning the light inward. Watching thought, watching the watcher, not to judge, not to explain, to see. And what you begin to see is not only your pain, but your habits, the automatic path your attention takes. Like a river carving the same groove, you feel it before the thought forms, a tilt of attention, a pressure in the chest, a subtle restlessness. This is the algorithm preparing to run, and when you catch it early, when you notice that tilt, you create a gap, a small pause, a chance to choose. Insight doesn't give you control, it gives you space. In that space, freedom grows. Choice becomes real. You don't react because you're supposed to. You respond because you're aware. The loops are layered. Some are obvious. Old stories, old fears, but others are buried. Identity-level assumptions. I'm this kind of person. People always treat me this way. I can't change. These are the deep loops, the code beneath the code. To see these requires silence, stillness, attention without conclusion. You can't think your way out. You watch, you stay, you feel. And then something shifts. The story becomes visible as story. The thought becomes object, not identity. The loop doesn't vanish, but it becomes optional. Over time, your nervous system adapts. The charge that used to come with certain thoughts weakens. The body doesn't tense in the same way. The emotion doesn't stick. You start to feel that awareness is not in the thought, it's around it. That shift is not subtle. It changes your baseline. You don't need to be right. You don't need to defend. You don't need to run. You are no longer trapped in the loop. You are watching the wheel turn without being spun by it. This awareness also applies off the cushion. In conversation, you feel the familiar pull to interrupt. You see the story forming about being ignored, but now you pause. You breathe. The loop is visible, and that visibility is power. At work, at home, in silence, the same principle applies. What you react to owns you. What you observe releases you. This isn't detachment, it's depth. You still feel, but you're not owned by the feeling. Over time, the loops that used to run your life lose their grip. Some fade completely, others visit less often. And even when they arise, you're not afraid. You've trained, you've watched, you've disarmed them with presence. Samsara can't be escaped by thought, only by seeing thought clearly, not as enemy, as echo, as pattern, as residue. And when the mind no longer fights its patterns, when it simply sees and stays, those patterns unravel, slowly, precisely, with silence. This is the algorithm of awakening, not adding more, removing what clouds, watching what repeats, staying when the loop asks you to run. Each moment of insight adds a crack to the cycle. Each pause breaks another link. Each breath taken in awareness rewrites the code. Eventually, even the question, "How do I escape?" fades. Because you're no longer trying to get out, you're simply not spinning. So now, let the loop be what it is. Let thought rise, let sensation come, and watch. Stay. Awareness doesn't fix, it sees, and that seeing is enough. And once the loop begins to weaken, once the mind stops chasing its own tail, something unusual starts to appear. Not another thought, not a conclusion, but a kind of gap. A stillness behind everything. Not emptiness in the way the world defines it, but a rich, open presence that doesn't move, doesn't react, and has been here the entire time. Beneath the loops, behind the reactions, beyond the layers of self-structure. This is where Dzogchen begins. Unlike other methods that work gradually through observation, training, or conceptual understanding, Dzogchen offers something rare, a direct glimpse into the mind's true nature. Not a theory, not a belief, a transmission. Known as pointing out instructions, this practice bypasses ordinary process and reveals the essence in a single, clear moment. To understand the value of this approach, you must first understand what the mind normally clings to. It holds identity, time, thought, feeling, resistance. All of this forms a bundle that seems solid, believable, and continuous. But it is not. It is layered noise. What Dzogchen points to is not the contents of the mind. It points to what sees them. It turns the attention around, away from thought and toward what is aware of thought. That subtle turning is not analysis, it's a shift in perspective. The pointing out instruction can be spoken by a teacher or triggered by a question. It is simple, yet the effect is immediate for those ready to receive it. A question like, "Who is aware of this moment?" Or, "Before any thought arises, what is already present?" When this is asked, not as philosophy, but as a direct experience, something stops. The mental process cannot continue in its normal way. Attention freezes, not in fear, but in space. The usual grasping mind is disarmed. That space, which feels like nothing at first, is actually everything. It is the backdrop of all experience, the open field where thoughts come and go. That field does not judge, does not cling, does not change. It does not need to be fixed because it was never broken. This recognition is not intellectual. In fact, trying to grasp it with thought ruins it. The mind tries to understand the nature of mind, but that's like fire trying to burn itself. It cannot be done. What can happen instead is recognition. Recognition is not built. It is uncovered. It's sudden and it's unmistakable. When it happens, even briefly, the feeling is clear. The one watching is not a person, not a voice, not an emotion. It is pure awareness, unstained, effortless, and already complete. This is why Dzogchen is considered radical. It does not require years of purification before giving a glimpse. It gives the glimpse first and lets the rest of the path fall into place around that knowing. It does not mean the glimpse is stable. Many lose it within seconds. But even the briefest encounter shifts the axis of perception. Afterward, something has changed. Thought loses authority. Emotion loses control. Identity no longer defines reality. The point is not to stay in this recognition permanently, not at first. The point is to return again and again until the recognition becomes so familiar that the mind no longer doubts it. Dzogchen teachers often describe the practice as resting. That word is important. Not efforting, not concentrating, resting. In what? In awareness itself. You are not looking for peace. You are resting in the space that is already peaceful. This rest does not mean passivity. It means non-interference. Experience arises. Thought, sound, sensation. But none of it grabs. None of it sticks. You don't stop anything. You don't hold anything. You let awareness be aware. There is no mantra, no breath count, no visualization, just direct, naked attention turned inward, then left untouched. The moment you try to shape it, you lose it. The moment you relax completely, it's there. This is not about removing thoughts. In Dzogchen, thoughts are not the problem. Believing them is. Identifying with them is. In the clear space of awareness, thoughts can rise and pass like birds through the sky. The sky is never damaged. This metaphor is central. The mind is not a container. It is the sky. Emotions are weather, temporary. Thoughts are clouds, passing. Recognition is the return to the sky itself again and again until it becomes home. Dzogchen teaches that this recognition is available in every moment. You don't need special conditions. You don't need a perfect mood. The only obstacle is distraction, the habit of looking outward, chasing meaning, following the next thought. The instruction is always the same. Stop. Look, not with eyes, with awareness. What is looking right now? Before the thought, before the name. What is seeing this? That pointing, when received sincerely, is enough. This practice also bypasses emotional reactivity in a unique way. When emotion arises, you don't resist, you don't indulge, you look at who is aware of the emotion. You don't ask what the emotion means, you ask who is experiencing it. In that question, you don't find an answer. You find openness. This openness is not empty, it is vibrant, alive, awake. It does not collapse under pressure. It is the one thing that doesn't move when everything else does. In Dzogchen, there is a term called Rigpa, pure awareness. Not awareness of, just awareness. It is not something you develop. It is something you recognize. When Rigpa is present, the mind becomes clear without effort. Perception becomes direct. Life becomes fluid. But Rigpa is delicate in the beginning, easily covered, easily forgotten. The practice is to keep returning, to keep looking, not outward, but into the stillness behind perception. There is no object to hold, no thought to examine, only the awareness noticing all of it. This simplicity is why the practice feels so vast. The entire world of complexity fades. What's left is direct contact with life as it is, without distortion. And in this contact, compassion naturally rises, not as a strategy, as a state. When awareness is not bound to identity, it includes everything. It sees the pain of others as not separate. It responds without needing a reason. The mind that rests in its true nature doesn't react out of habit. It meets life with clarity, even in difficulty. That doesn't mean it's never shaken. It means it returns quickly. It trusts stillness more than story. Over time, you begin to recognize when you've left the view, not with guilt, but with awareness. You return, you rest, you stay until the mind quiets and the natural presence returns. This path is not about becoming someone new. It's about dissolving everything that blocks what is already awake. Dzogchen doesn't reject any other practice. It includes them, but it leads with recognition. It uses the direct experience of mind to reframe all effort. Once you've tasted the ground, every step becomes lighter. So now, allow this moment to be enough. Drop effort. Drop looking. Let awareness settle into itself. What sees does not need to be improved. What watches does not need to be named. Just rest. No technique, no control. Let the silence hold you. And in that, the nature of mind reveals itself. Uninvited, unshaken, unbound. And when awareness rests in itself, untouched by thought, undisturbed by feeling, even the most difficult parts of experience begin to surface. Not to distract, to be seen, to be welcomed, because what remains hidden never transforms. And the more awareness deepens, the more it reveals. Not just peace, but poison. The teachings of Tantra do not divide life into pure and impure. They do not ask you to escape your emotions or silence your instincts. They ask you to turn toward them, especially the ones you've avoided, especially the ones you've labeled bad: anger, desire, pride, envy, ignorance. These are not flaws to suppress. In Tantra, they are fuel. If used wisely, they do not destroy. they liberate. The 5 poisons are not separate from your mind. They are the raw energies that, when misunderstood, cause suffering. But in their purified form, each becomes a specific kind of wisdom. The process is not denial. It is transmutation. You do not pretend they aren't there. You look directly into them until their true nature is revealed. Anger is the first poison. It is sharp, immediate. It rises in the chest, tightens the throat, narrows the eyes. Most people fear it, suppress it, or act from it. But Tantra teaches that anger is not the problem. Misused anger becomes harm, but purified anger becomes clarity. It burns away illusion. It cuts through confusion. The wisdom hidden inside anger is mirror-like wisdom. It reflects exactly what is present without distortion. It doesn't push away. It doesn't hold on. When you stay with anger without reacting, when you watch it fully without feeding it, it begins to reveal its intelligence. You see clearly what must stop, what must change. You see truth without filter. That sharpness, when directed by awareness, becomes precision. To work with anger in this way, you do not indulge the story. You turn inward. You feel the heat. You breathe into it. You trace it to its root. Often it hides pain, or boundary, or power that was never claimed. When met fully, anger transforms into direct presence, not reactive, not soft, clear, stable, awake. Desire is the second poison. Its energy pulls, reaches, wants to attach. Craving is its habit. But craving is not the same as longing. Desire, when distorted, becomes addiction, dissatisfaction, restlessness. But its essence is not broken. At its root, desire is the wish to merge, to connect, to return to wholeness. When purified, desire becomes the wisdom of discernment. You no longer chase everything. You recognize the true value of what you're drawn to. You begin to sense which desires are distortions and which are aligned with truth. You stop being pulled by compulsion. You start moving with intention. Desire becomes wisdom when you remain present with the longing without losing yourself in the object. You feel the intensity, but you do not collapse into it. You stay. You look. You ask what the desire is pointing toward beneath the surface. Often it is not the thing. It is the experience, connection, intimacy, freedom, joy. When desire is seen with awareness, the grasping stops. In its place, there is appreciation. The energy of desire becomes radiant. It no longer says, "I need this." It says, "I am here with this." The movement becomes open, not hungry. Pride is the third poison. It inflates, it compares, it separates. It tells stories about being better or worse. Most of the time, pride hides fear. Fear of being seen as weak, unworthy, ordinary. But pride has its place. It carries the seed of dignity. When pride is seen clearly, it transforms into the wisdom of equality. You begin to see that there is nothing to prove. You are not above or below anyone. You are simply here, and everyone else is too. Different in form, equal in value. To transmute pride, you don't humiliate yourself. You see through the illusion of hierarchy. You notice how the mind compares by habit. Then you let that comparison drop. You rest in presence. In presence, there is no higher or lower, just being. This shift frees your energy. You no longer need to defend your worth. You stop performing. You start meeting others without armor. True confidence arises, not from believing you're better, but from knowing you don't have to be. Envy is the fourth poison. It creeps in silently. It whispers, "Why them and not me?" It contracts the heart. It breeds resentment. But its root is not evil. It's longing for a potential you haven't yet claimed. Envy, when met with awareness, becomes the wisdom of accomplishment. It shows you what matters to you. It reveals your hidden values. The practice is to notice envy without shame, to ask, what part of me wants to grow in this direction? When you feel envy and pause, you begin to see it not as judgment of others, but as information about yourself. It points to a quality you admire, a capacity you desire to develop. This is not wrong, it is guidance. You begin to celebrate what you see in others because you no longer believe it is missing in you. You know that recognition is a mirror, that every spark of admiration is also a signal of possibility. Envy dissolves, joy remains. Ignorance is the fifth poison. It is not stupidity. It is forgetfulness. It is distraction. It is the tendency to sleepwalk through experience. It avoids, numbs, drifts. It covers awareness with dullness. But at its root, ignorance hides a deeper quality: openness. The mind that forgets is also the mind that can begin again. The blankness can be transformed into spaciousness. When ignorance is met with awareness, it becomes the wisdom of spacious mind, not busy, not frozen, open, clear, receptive, not trying to control, not rushing to label, simply resting in what is. This transformation happens when you choose to be present with the dullness. You feel the pull to drift away. You stay. You breathe into the fog. You wait. And slowly, light comes in. Not bright, not loud, gentle, constant, quietly alive. Together, these 5 poisons hold the whole spectrum of emotional reactivity. Every thought, every trigger, every cycle of suffering can be traced to some blend of these energies, but none of them need to be removed. Each holds the potential for wisdom. Tantra does not avoid these energies. It trains you to hold them, to meet them, to extract their essence. This is a different kind of power, not control over others, but mastery within. You become unshakable, not by being untouched, but by knowing how to work with everything that rises. This path demands presence, honesty, the willingness to feel fully without reacting blindly, the courage to let go of the identity that clings to being wounded, the trust that your most intense emotions are not flaws, but gateways. This is not easy work, but it is real, and it brings you into deeper contact with your own strength. Over time, these transformations become your nature. You no longer fear anger, you respect it. You no longer collapse into craving, you observe it. You don't mask pride, you release it. You don't feed envy, you learn from it. You don't fight ignorance, you wake up inside it. This is what it means to transmute, not to escape what hurts, but to let it become what heals. So now, whatever arises, let it come. Watch the poison, feel the heat, breathe through the reaction, and stay. The wisdom is already inside. Let it reveal itself. Let the fire purify. Let the storm pass through. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to be present. And once the poisons begin to change form, Once anger becomes clarity, desire becomes discernment, and ignorance gives way to space, a new kind of energy begins to stir in the body, not raw or reactive, but refined, aware, alive, and steady. But this energy, if not balanced, can scatter just as easily. Transformation creates movement, and movement needs direction. It needs grounding. This is where the breath becomes the bridge. Vajrayana practice offers one of the most direct methods for rebalancing the system after emotional and energetic release, the 9-round breathing technique. At first glance, it appears simple, a breathing pattern done in a specific order. But its impact is profound because it works on the level most people ignore, the flow of inner wind or lung that carries thought and feeling through the subtle channels of the body. In Vajrayana, it is understood that the mind does not travel alone. It rides on breath, not just the air in the lungs, but the energetic breath, prana, wind, movement. Every moment of reactivity, every fixation, every emotional surge is mirrored by a disturbance in this wind. Calmness, clarity, and stability arise when the wind is flowing evenly. That is the purpose of this practice, not just to calm, but to harmonize, not just to feel better, but to stabilize the mind on a deep, structural level. The practice begins by sitting with a tall spine, relaxed shoulders, and natural awareness. The posture itself becomes a signal to the nervous system. Something is shifting. Something is becoming still. One hand rests on each knee, the gaze softens, and the body becomes a vessel for attention. The breathing pattern follows a very specific rhythm. You begin by exhaling through one nostril while gently closing the other with your finger. You inhale through the opposite side, then switch. Each round consists of 3 sets of exhalation and inhalation, coordinated in a precise sequence: left, right, center. These aren't arbitrary directions. In the subtle body, the left and right channels correspond to specific emotional tendencies. The left, associated with the moon, connects to aversion, emotional heaviness, and contraction. The right, linked to the sun, holds tendencies of desire, grasping, and restlessness. The central channel, the pathway of deep stability, remains dormant until the left and right are cleared. When energy flows into the center, the mind settles without effort. Thought slows, reaction fades, and a natural stillness arises. Each round of breath clears these channels gradually. With the left nostril exhale, you're releasing the obscurations of emotional heaviness. With the right, you're letting go of restlessness and attachment. With the central breath, you're inviting the wind into its true path, stable, luminous, and centered. This isn't visualization alone. It's physiological and energetic at once. As the breath deepens, the parasympathetic nervous system activates. Cortisol levels drop. The heart rate steadies. But something subtler is also happening. The mind, no longer pulled by scattered winds, begins to focus, not by control, but by alignment. The breath becomes a teacher. It doesn't need to be forced. It needs to be followed. With each round, you learn to watch the breath, not shape it. You sense the body opening, the chest softening, the spine elongating. Attention returns to the present, not because you try, but because there's nowhere else it needs to be. In Vajrayana, it is taught that karmic imprints, the tendencies that form thought loops and emotional reactions, are carried on these inner winds. 9-round breathing doesn't remove karma through belief. It clears the conditions through which karma activates. It's like smoothing the tracks on which the train of thought normally runs. Once smooth, the train slows. Sometimes it stops completely. When this happens, insight naturally arises. You don't need to look for answers. They become visible. You see what drives your habits. You feel where tension lives in your chest or your jaw. You notice how craving subtly speeds up the breath, how fear holds it back, and you begin to unlearn these patterns from the inside. This technique is especially helpful at transitional moments, before sleep, at the start of meditation, after emotional upset, or before decision-making. It acts as a reset, a full system-level return to clarity. It can also be used before engaging in deeper visualization practices, as it prepares the inner structure to receive and hold refined awareness. Because when the channels are blocked, higher practices cannot land. You might hear the teaching, repeat the mantra, even visualize the deity, but if your inner wind is disorganized, none of it penetrates deeply. 9-round breathing lays the groundwork. It doesn't add, it clears. It prepares the field for wisdom to take root. The effect is cumulative. The more you practice, the faster the nervous system learns to shift. Over time, the body recognizes the signal. This breath means return. This pattern means balance. You stop needing long periods of effort. The shift becomes intuitive. This breathing practice also strengthens self-awareness in daily life. You start to feel when the winds are becoming disturbed. You notice the breath rising into the chest, becoming shallow. You catch yourself speaking too fast or holding the jaw tight. These are signs that one of the channels is beginning to dominate. And rather than letting the pattern run, you breathe, you pause, you balance. This is where the practice becomes powerful, not just on the cushion, but in the middle of conversation, in a moment of doubt, in the heat of conflict. You don't have to escape to realign. The breath is always with you. The technique is simple enough to remember, precise enough to work. You also begin to notice your mind becoming less sticky. Thoughts come, but they don't land with the same weight. Emotions pass through without leaving residue. You begin to recognize that stability isn't stillness alone. It's rhythm. The nervous system needs movement, but it also needs return. 9-round breathing gives it both. The central channel, when accessed consistently, becomes more than a concept. It becomes a felt presence. You begin to trust that there is a still line running through every moment. When your attention rests there, the chaos outside doesn't define you. The opinions of others lose urgency. The next thought feels less important. What takes over is presence, not dull, but aware and steady. In deeper stages of practice, the breath becomes so subtle that you barely notice it. It becomes like a thread, almost transparent, yet strong enough to anchor the entire system. The mind rests in it, and the sense of me begins to dissolve into it. This breath is not yours. It is life itself moving through form. When you stop claiming it, it stops reacting, it starts flowing. And with that flow, something opens. You stop struggling to feel centered. You are centered. Not because everything is calm, but because nothing can pull you away anymore. So now, let the breath take its place, not as a tool, but as a guide. Left, right, center, again and again, not to fix, to return. Let the wind settle. Let the mind follow, and in the space that opens, stay. And once the breath aligns and the wind finds its center, when the body no longer pulls and the mind no longer presses forward, something even subtler begins to appear. Not a feeling, not a thought, not even stillness, but something in between. The space that remains when everything else falls quiet. Not absence, but depth. Not void, but resonance. This is where sound ends and something deeper begins. This is where silence reveals itself. Silence in meditation is not the absence of noise. It is a presence in its own right, not something you create, something you uncover. And in the teachings of deep practice, silence is not neutral. It's reflective. It doesn't sit passively. It reflects the mind back to itself. It reveals what was always there, just beneath the movement. In Vajrayana and Mahayana traditions, there is a phrase often repeated: emptiness is not nothingness. Emptiness is unconditioned potential. It holds everything, but clings to nothing. Silence is the sonic form of that principle. It's the moment after a sound fades, before the next begins. It's the space in which every chant arises, every bell rings, every breath lands. When you meditate with sound, whether a mantra or a bell or your own breath, there's always a gap. The moment the sound ends, the space expands. And in that space, something rare can be felt. The mind, with nothing to hold on to, hesitates. It stops projecting. It stops naming. That hesitation is the doorway. In this silence, awareness is not directed toward anything. It simply is. It doesn't look. It doesn't analyze. It rests in itself. And what it finds is not blankness, but clarity. A kind of brightness with no center. You are not watching it. You are it. This is what's meant by the sound of emptiness. It's not quiet in the ordinary sense. It has weight, texture. It reveals how much the mind depends on stimulation to define itself. When the sound is gone and the next moment hasn't arrived, you begin to feel the root of your own presence, free from content. This practice isn't just sitting in a quiet room. You can be in a noisy city, in the middle of movement, and still hear the silence. Because it's not external. It's the space between reactions, between expectations, between layers of identity. The more you listen to silence, the more it teaches. You start to feel how every sound points back to it. The bell rings, and you hear its tone. But after it fades, what remains? That fading tone becomes your teacher. It shows how even the most beautiful experience dissolves. Not in sadness, in return. This return is not loss, it's rest. It's the reminder that nothing needs to be held forever. Every sensation is born in silence and returns to silence. That rhythm is the rhythm of impermanence. The more you feel it, the less you grasp. As you practice, your attention becomes more refined. You stop chasing content. You begin to explore the gaps. You feel the moment after a thought, the space before a word, the breath before speaking. These are not empty spaces. They are alive. They hold stillness without tension. Silence also reveals your mental habits. The discomfort you feel in its presence isn't because silence is lacking, it's because the mind is addicted to noise. Silence shows you what happens when that addiction isn't fed. The restlessness, the urgency to move, the impulse to think. These rise to the surface, and if you can stay with them, they pass. What's left is peace, not because you forced it, but because it was always there beneath the noise. This form of listening is different than hearing. It's not about sound, it's about attention. Listening to silence means becoming silence. No separation, no observer, just awareness, open and without edges. Over time, this listening becomes a habit. In daily life, you begin to sense the silence beneath speech. In music, you notice the rest as much as the notes. In conversation, you hear the quiet between words. Even in conflict, you find the space behind reactivity. This doesn't make you distant, it makes you receptive. You start responding from a deeper place, not from thought, from presence, because silence doesn't interrupt life, it supports it. It gives everything its shape. The more you rest in it, the more your nervous system recalibrates. The stress that once pushed you forward starts to soften. You stop rushing to fill every moment. You let things arrive, and just as importantly, you let them go. Silence also becomes the ground for deeper insight. In the space between thoughts, the patterns become visible, not as analysis, but as recognition. You see the habits forming, the beliefs repeating, the emotions surfacing, and you don't need to do anything. The seeing is enough. The silence gives you room to see without reacting. It is also where compassion deepens. Because in silence, the need to defend disappears. The ego softens. You hear others more clearly, not just their words, but what's beneath them. You listen without preparing your reply. You stay present without needing to change anything. Silence is not withdrawal, it's inclusion. It holds all things without resistance. You begin to sense that stillness is not separate from action, that you can move from silence, speak from silence, love from silence. As your relationship with silence grows, so does your stability. You stop needing to prove yourself through noise. You trust what doesn't speak. You trust what doesn't demand attention. And when life becomes loud again, when emotion surges, when thought races, you know how to return. Not by escaping, by listening, not for sound, for what's underneath. Silence becomes your refuge, your compass, your mirror. You no longer treat it as emptiness to be filled. You see it as fullness revealed. So now, as you rest again, let the silence be what it is. Don't chase a feeling. Don't wait for a sound. Let what fades dissolve. Let what remains remain. And let the stillness between everything guide you back to the place you never left. And when silence becomes the teacher, when the space between sound begins to feel more honest than the sound itself, a deeper shift becomes possible, not in emotion, not in thought, but in how perception itself is happening, because even stillness, even peace, still appears to a center, a place from which awareness moves outward. But what if that direction is reversed? What happens not when you look at silence, but when silence looks at you? This is the core of a non-dual practice so direct and subtle that it doesn't aim to calm the mind or analyze its content. It goes before content. It turns perception around. Instead of focusing on what you see, it asks, who sees? Instead of organizing around thoughts or feelings, it asks, what is aware of thought, before thought says anything about it? In most moments, awareness is projected outward. You see objects, you hear sounds, you feel sensations, and you relate to them as a subject encountering something separate. This outward movement defines ordinary consciousness, but non-dual practice begins when you pause that outward motion and allow awareness to turn back, not toward memory, not toward concept, but toward itself. This turning is not philosophical, it is experiential. The moment awareness is no longer reaching toward something, it starts to recognize itself. There is no object, no identity, only the presence that sees, hears, and knows. And that presence is not a person. It has no boundary, no name, no history. It is the awareness you've always been, beneath every role, every thought, every moment of striving. This is called reversing the arrow of perception. Normally, attention moves like an arrow, shooting out toward experiences, toward success, understanding, improvement. Even in meditation, the arrow often points toward goals, calmness, insight, peace. But when the arrow turns, when you allow the mind to look from awareness instead of ego, something profound reveals itself. The center collapses. There is no arrow, only seeing. This is not about watching your thoughts. That still contains a watcher. It's about letting go of the watcher entirely. It's about not just asking, what am I aware of, but what is this awareness itself, before anything is known. This movement, or rather this unmovement, creates an entirely different state of being. Thought may continue, sensation may arise, but there's no self grasping at any of it. The sense of me as thinker, feeler, doer, the one who has a life, begins to fade. Not in a negative way, in a freeing way. What's left is openness, a presence that is not in time, a witness that does not separate. As this practice deepens, the illusion of control begins to dissolve. You see that the ego never really ran anything. It was just claiming ownership over what arose on its own. Thoughts arise, emotions rise. The ego says, I did this. But awareness simply sees. It doesn't control the stream, it allows it. This allowing doesn't make you passive, it makes you real. Without the need to defend a position, without the need to be right, without the pressure of becoming someone, there is space to respond. And response from awareness is clearer than reaction from ego. In this view, action still happens. The body moves, the voice speaks. But there's no inner commentator assigning ownership. There's no background noise of, I am doing this. There's just doing. And this is where freedom begins. Not freedom to do whatever you want, but freedom from needing to be anyone. The practice is subtle. You may begin by simply sitting and letting attention rest without a goal. Then you ask, not with words, but as a gesture, where is awareness coming from? Before any sight, where is the seeing? Before thought, what knows the thought is present? You don't look for an answer. You rest in the direction of that question. Sometimes this brings a clear shift, a moment when the sense of a center drops. You feel like space itself. Sometimes it's quiet. A soft relaxation of the need to hold identity. Either way, it is real, and it grows with practice. You can also apply this reversal in daily life. When emotion rises, instead of asking what the emotion is about, turn attention back to the awareness of the emotion. Who feels this? Before the story, what sees the story forming? When in conversation, instead of being caught in thoughts about how you're being perceived, notice the awareness in which both your voice and the other person's voice arise. There's no one inside the head. There's only presence hearing presence. This reversal cuts through fear, not by fighting it, by seeing that the fear arises in something that cannot be threatened. Pain may come, confusion may come, but awareness is untouched. It doesn't break. This realization brings a stability not dependent on circumstances. You stop needing things to go your way to feel peace. You stop needing others to validate your sense of self. You no longer cling to ideas about who you are, because the one who sees is already whole. As this deepens, even the search for spiritual experience softens. You stop looking for signs. You stop waiting for insight. The insight is already present in the fact of awareness, not in what is seen, in the seeing itself. This recognition does not come through effort. It comes through allowing. The moment you try to hold it, it's gone. The moment you relax into being, it returns. It's always available because it is not something to be gained. It is what you already are. The paradox is that nothing changes, but everything shifts. Life continues. Sensations happen. Thoughts appear. But the structure holding them is no longer tense. It's no longer personal. It's no longer defensive. There's just clarity. This is why non-dual traditions speak so little about progress. The self that measures progress is itself the illusion. The only thing to do is return, again and again, to look not at content, but at context, to rest not in understanding, but in direct experience of awareness. This experience becomes more stable over time. At first it comes in glimpses, moments when the mind quiets and perception turns back on itself. Over time, those moments link together. They become your baseline. Your identity begins to shift from a character in the story to the screen on which the story plays. You no longer need to perfect the story, you just need to stay with the screen. Eventually, even the effort to reverse perception dissolves. There's no more arrow. Awareness looks and finds only itself. No separation, no division, just presence, silent, open, and complete. So now, as attention softens, let the mind stop chasing. Let it stop describing. Let it stop becoming. Turn back. Before thought, before feeling, not to analyze, to rest. Let awareness be as it is, not inside you, not outside, just here, seeing everything, holding nothing. And once perception reverses, once the sense of self fades into the seeing itself, something unexpected rises from beneath the surface, something older than thought and deeper than identity. Fear, not as a moment of panic, but as a presence, quiet and constant. The fear of letting go, the fear of losing control, the fear of not existing in the way you've always known. Even when awareness has glimpsed its true nature, fear still lingers at the edges. It doesn't respond to logic. It lives in the body, in instinct, in memory. And this is where Chöd begins. Chöd, an advanced Tibetan practice, does not try to calm fear. It meets it directly. Not with resistance, but with offering. It turns toward everything the ego avoids and makes it the ground of liberation. It does not work by removing the fear, but by giving the self that fears nothing left to cling to, not through denial, but through radical generosity. You offer your very body, not in fantasy, but in symbolic ritual, to the very energies that cause you to resist, to contract, to grasp. This is not performance. It's direct confrontation with attachment. You visualize taking your own body apart, transforming it into offerings of light and nourishment, and feeding it to demons, not external spirits, but internal representations of everything you fear and fight. Hunger, judgment, shame, death. You don't defeat them. You feed them. You dissolve the war. The practice of chöd begins in solitude. Traditionally done in cemeteries or desolate places, the practitioner places themselves in symbolic confrontation with death. In the dark, in isolation, with no distractions, the mind's deepest fears rise naturally. And that's the point. You do not seek safety. You remove the protections. You sit in the exact place where discomfort lives, and instead of running, you open. Chöd is rooted in the understanding that most suffering is resistance. The more you try to protect the self, the more afraid you become. The more tightly you hold the body, the more power fear has over it. Chöd cuts through this by offering the body to fear itself. You say to the inner demon, "Take it." You strip the ego of its last possession, and in that act, freedom begins. The ritual involves a sequence of visualizations and chants. You visualize separating your consciousness from your physical form. You see your body laid out before you, then transformed into nectar, light, or divine food. You invite all beings, all spirits, all protectors, and all demons to receive this offering. There is no exclusion. Everyone is fed. Even the parts of yourself you once tried to hide. What happens in this process is not destruction, it's release. The body isn't harmed, the mind isn't punished. What dissolves is the need to defend. What ends is the illusion of ownership. Over time, this act of inner surrender breaks the habit of clinging. Fear loses its usual grip, because you've already given everything. What is left to lose? What can be taken from one who offers willingly? This is not spiritual bypassing. It doesn't ignore pain. It brings pain directly into the ritual space. But instead of avoiding, the practice meets pain with presence and offering. Each fear becomes a guest. Each demon becomes a teacher. The energy that was once avoided becomes honored. One of the most profound effects of chöd is its ability to restore wholeness. By including everything, even what was previously rejected, the psyche stops splitting. The inner war ends. You begin to feel integrated, not through perfection, but through full acceptance. You're no longer trying to become anything. You are fully here without separation. This healing is not abstract. It affects the nervous system. You begin to notice less anxiety around discomfort. You move more easily through difficult situations. Your reactions soften, not because you forced peace, but because you stopped protecting the self that feared. That self no longer runs the system. Chöd is especially powerful for trauma, grief, and deep emotional blocks. It doesn't analyze them. It gives them space. It treats them as honored guests. You invite your wounds to the feast, not to be fixed, but to be fed. And paradoxically, when they are fed with attention, they stop demanding it. When they are welcomed, they stop controlling. The chants used in chöd are not empty repetition. They are vibrational tools designed to shift the subtle winds in the body. They prepare the system to hold intense emotion without collapse. They tune the practitioner into deeper rhythms. Sound and silence work together to steady the mind and body. The drum used in chöd, the damaru, creates a rhythmic field that mirrors the natural cycles of expansion and contraction. This rhythm supports the mind in releasing its normal storyline. The bell, often used alongside, symbolizes wisdom. Together, sound, visualization, and breath weave an immersive experience that allows the practitioner to stay fully present with fear without falling into it. As the practice continues, identity begins to loosen. The sense of being someone defending a position, holding a shape, projecting an image, all of it starts to dissolve. Not in confusion, but in clarity. You see that what you are cannot be harmed, because it isn't confined to the body or the story. Eventually, even the visualization dissolves, the offerings are made, the demons fed, the body released, and what remains is space, silent, aware, free. This space becomes familiar. You learn to live from it, not in detachment, but in grounded compassion. You meet others without fear of loss. You engage without needing to protect. You no longer react to discomfort with defense. You stay with it. You offer it. The deeper you go, the less you fear your own humanity. You allow pain. You allow joy. You allow confusion. You stop needing to hide any part of it, because you've practiced surrender at the most essential level. Chöd becomes a daily medicine, not just in ritual, but in relationship, in conflict, in silence. You notice fear arise, and instead of pulling back, you lean in. You offer presence. You offer breath. You offer what you used to guard. And as you continue, something changes. Fear is no longer the enemy. It becomes a signal, a call to return. Each time it arises, you know the path. Open, offer, dissolve. So now, as the silence settles again, let the body be light. Let the mind be still. And if fear appears, don't turn away. Let it come. Let it see that you have nothing to defend. Offer what remains, and rest in what's left behind. And once the offering is made, once even fear is welcomed and the body is no longer held as a shield, the field of awareness opens without resistance. But in that openness, a different kind of silence begins to call, one that can't be touched within the noise of daily life, one that doesn't rise in ceremony or vanish when the ritual ends. It calls for something deeper, a long pause, a full step back, not from practice, but from distraction, not from life, but from everything that covers it. This is the call to solitude, not as escape, but as a necessary return. In the yogic and tantric traditions, solitary retreat is not a luxury. It is medicine. It is a structured descent into the inner layers of being that cannot be touched in group settings or casual practice, and in its most potent form, it happens in nature. Not for comfort, for clarity. You leave behind the social mirror, the routines, the roles, and you enter a space where nothing reflects you back but sky, ground, and silence. This kind of solitude is not about being alone in a room for an afternoon. It is sustained withdrawal, weeks, months, sometimes longer. It is a radical act because it removes everything the mind depends on to stabilize its sense of identity. Without conversation, without schedules, without social roles, the mind no longer knows who it's supposed to be. And that discomfort is the point. The false layers begin to unravel. In the early stages of retreat, this unraveling often feels like chaos. The silence outside reveals the noise inside. Thoughts increase, emotions rise. Memories that were buried begin to surface. It can feel like regression, but it's not. It's detox. The constant movement of daily life had kept these layers buried. Now they rise, and they must be seen. But because there is no one to talk to, no one to impress, no one to distract or blame, the only option is to stay, to sit, to walk, to breathe. The forest becomes your companion. The wind becomes your teacher. You begin to remember how to listen, not to ideas, but to sensation, to the subtle rhythms of your own nervous system. Time changes. Without clocks or calendars, the mind loses its usual structure. Day becomes light, night becomes darkness. Meals happen when hunger speaks. Sleep comes when the body agrees. This natural rhythm is not lazy. It's alive. It tunes the body and mind to cycles older than culture. In the absence of outer feedback, the inner voice becomes sharper. You start to feel what's true, not what's correct or useful or expected, what's honest. That honesty may come with grief or joy or boredom. It doesn't matter. You let it move. You stay with it. There's nowhere else to go. And slowly, something inside begins to settle. The thoughts become less sticky. The emotions pass more quickly. The body softens. The ground under you feels more familiar than any room you've lived in. You become porous, not vulnerable, but connected. What solitude teaches over time is that clarity doesn't need content. It comes from subtraction. When you remove what isn't essential, what remains is not empty, it's vibrant. You begin to see that most of what you called you was a response to environment. In this stillness, the shape of the real self starts to emerge, not as a thing, but as a presence. Practices done in solitude deepen exponentially. The mind, no longer pulled outward, becomes a vessel. Meditation extends naturally, not because of discipline, but because there's nothing interrupting it. You sit and awareness opens. You walk and stillness follows. The boundary between practice and life dissolves. In wilderness retreat, you may have no mirrors. This absence itself becomes practice. You forget how you look. You stop performing. You start being. The ego, without an audience, becomes quiet. Its stories feel less urgent. Its claims sound less convincing. You begin to trust what doesn't speak. The elements become guides. Earth steadies. Water cleanses. Fire sharpens. Air softens. Space holds. These are not poetic symbols. They are real forces in the body. You feel them more clearly when there's no barrier between you and the land. Each day is a dialogue with nature. Each night a retreat into deeper seeing. Food becomes sacred. You eat what you prepare. You feel what nourishes and what dulls. Every act is slowed, and in that slowing, intention returns. You no longer rush. You no longer consume for stimulation. You eat to live. You live to feel. One of the most significant effects of solitude is the end of comparison. There's no one to measure against, no race to win, no reputation to manage. The mind lets go of competition. It becomes simpler, kinder, less demanding. And in this simplicity, insights arise, not as ideas, but as shifts. You may realize truths you've known intellectually for years but never embodied. You begin to feel what it means to be grounded, not just think about it. You understand silence as healing, not absence. You find joy in repetition, meaning in effort. At a certain depth, you begin to sense the presence of something larger, not as a belief, as a direct experience. You feel supported by the space around you. The trees don't need your name. The sky doesn't judge. The rocks don't rush. You learn to be without defense, and in that openness, healing happens. The nervous system releases. The breath evens out. The old patterns lose their grip. You no longer identify with them. They become memories, not definitions. Solitude also teaches you how to return. When retreat ends, you do not re-enter the world as the same person. You move more slowly. You speak less reactively. You hear what people say beneath their words. You stop taking everything personally. You begin to live more from the quiet space inside than from outer noise. This return is not always easy. The world has not changed, but you have. It may take time to adjust. You may feel the pull to re-identify with old roles. But now you know. You've tasted the difference. You carry the stillness with you. The greatest gift of solitude is the realization that you are not separate. In silence, in stillness, in aloneness, the illusion of separation breaks. You feel your place in the world, not above, not below, not other, just here, part of the rhythm, part of the whole. So now, let the stillness deepen. Let solitude not be something distant, but something alive in this very breath. No need for words, no need for mirrors. Just space, just presence, just you as you are, without defense, without shape, without end. And when the noise has been left behind, when solitude has stripped away identity, and the body has relearned how to live without mirrors, something opens that is not a moment, not a thought, not even a feeling. It is a quality of awareness so subtle and spacious that it seems almost unreal until you rest in it long enough to see that it is more real than anything else. This is the beginning of the sky mind. In both Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions, this metaphor is used again and again, not to explain, but to point. The sky doesn't resist clouds. It doesn't hold to storms. It isn't improved by clear weather or diminished by fog. It remains untouched. This is your true mind, not the thoughts, but the open space in which thoughts move. Ordinary awareness tends to contract. It focuses, it narrows. It becomes tight around objects, desires, fears. This contraction becomes a habit. You feel it physically, around the eyes, in the chest, in the stomach. It's not just emotional, it's structural. The body and mind shape themselves to fit an idea of self, of control, of certainty, and this shaping creates tension. Sky mind is the opposite of that shaping. It does not tighten around experience. It does not select or reject. It sees everything and holds nothing. And in that holding, there is no weight. To cultivate this form of awareness is not to do something new. It is to stop doing what restricts you. You don't build the sky, you stop blocking your view of it. One of the most direct practices is to begin each meditation not with effort, but with release. You sit. You notice the tendency to concentrate, to focus, to grip the breath or the posture, and then you stop. You don't try to make the mind quiet. You let it be as it is. If thoughts come, they come. If emotion rises, it rises. But you don't follow, you don't resist. You rest as the space in which these things appear. This resting is not sleepy. It's awake, but it's not directed. It's aware of what's arising, but not captured by it. You're not behind your eyes. You're not a voice in the head. You're the field in which body, thought, and feeling unfold. Over time, you begin to notice the change. Thoughts still happen, but they move like wind, not something to believe or fix. You don't stop the wind. You just don't hold it. And in this non-holding, the mind becomes light. This spaciousness allows experience to unfold without distortion. You stop needing to fix reality to feel okay. You stop arguing with each moment. You see clearly, not because your mind is empty, but because it's wide enough to include everything without conflict. Sky mind does not mean indifference. It means inclusiveness. You're present with pain, but not trapped in it. You're aware of joy, but not clinging to it. You begin to sense a presence that stays, even as everything changes. One of the key teachings in Dzogchen is that this awareness is already complete. You don't need to add anything. The more you try, the further you move from it. It's like the sky. Any attempt to grasp it fails. But when you stop grasping, there it is. You learn to look without searching, to hear without interpreting, to be without defending. This is how the sky becomes a guide. Every time the mind tightens, you return to the metaphor. Is this thought like a cloud? Is this emotion passing? Can I stay as the space around it? Mahamudra offers a similar approach. You look at the mind, then look at the one who is looking. You reverse the gaze until there's nothing left to find, only vastness aware of itself. It doesn't matter what's happening in that space. The point is that the space itself is always stable. Thoughts arise and dissolve, sensations change, but awareness holds. This awareness is not separate from life. It moves through action, through speech, through relationship. But when rooted in sky mind, you stop shrinking into reaction. You respond from wholeness. You don't lose yourself in the moment. You move with it. In daily life, sky mind changes how you relate to pressure. The deadlines, conversations, emotions, they don't land with the same intensity. Not because you're distant, but because you're not confined. You feel the contraction and release it. You speak from space. You walk from silence. You don't rush to fix what doesn't need fixing. This quality of awareness also invites deeper listening to others, to life. You hear what's between the words. You sense what's beneath the surface, because your awareness is no longer filled with your own noise. There's space for the world. This space is also deeply forgiving. It doesn't cling to old versions of yourself. It doesn't trap you in history. In the sky, nothing is held. Each moment is fresh. When you live from this view, the past softens, the future loosens. You stop needing to know what comes next. Sky mind also supports creativity. The most original thoughts do not come from pressure. They arise in space, in quiet, in openness. You stop forcing insight. You allow it to appear, like a bird crossing an open sky, unexpected, graceful, ungraspable. As you return to this awareness again and again, the nervous system recalibrates. The grip of stress loosens. The body rests deeper. The breath moves more freely. You're not suppressing anything. You're not escaping. You're just not compressing yourself into every reaction. Eventually, sky mind becomes your home. You notice contraction immediately and return to space. You sense when your thoughts are too tight and let them dissolve. You don't force presence. You trust it. Even in difficult times, the sky doesn't change. Storms pass, but the vastness remains. This becomes your anchor, not rigid, alive, wide, steady. So now, let everything that's rising be as it is. No fixing, no labeling, no holding. Stay with the space around it all. Stay with the stillness behind the movement. Let the sky be your mind, and your mind be sky. And when the mind opens like the sky, when thoughts pass without leaving marks, and nothing feels too tight to hold, there comes a natural urge to live differently. Not to accumulate more, but to let go. Not to build higher walls, but to remove what's unnecessary. As the mind widens, the heart wants less, the body wants space. The soul begins to crave simplicity, not for aesthetic, but for truth. This is the ground of noble poverty. In the Buddhist path, noble poverty is not about deprivation. It's not about glorifying hardship or rejecting the world. It is the conscious act of simplifying in order to see clearly. To choose less, not out of lack, but from clarity. To give up excess, not to suffer, but to be free. It is a practice of conscious renunciation, a way to break the illusion that security comes from possession, that peace comes from control. The modern world teaches the opposite, that having more means being safe, that comfort requires layers of protection, that identity is built from what you own, how much you earn, what you display, and so the mind collects objects, plans, opinions, systems. But the more you gather, the more fragile the structure becomes. Each new item, each commitment, each habit carries weight, and over time, the mind begins to serve what it once created for comfort. Noble poverty reverses this logic. It invites you to stop asking how to gain more and instead ask, what can I release? This practice begins with attention. You look honestly at your surroundings, your routines, your decisions. What is necessary? What supports clarity? What do you carry out of fear, out of habit, out of a need to maintain an image? You begin by removing the obvious. Clutter, distractions, excess choices. But it goes deeper. You start questioning the emotional and psychological habits that feed accumulation. The need to be approved of, the urge to always be prepared, the fear of saying no, the belief that comfort is found in more. Poverty, in this tradition, is not about being poor in spirit. It's about being rich in space. When you release attachment to control, space becomes the teacher. You begin to feel the difference between survival and fear-based survival. Most modern security is an attempt to escape discomfort, not danger. Living simply reveals how much is actually needed, and often it's far less than you think. You don't need to give up everything all at once. But each step into simplicity shows you something that excess was hiding. Each time you let go, the mind becomes more honest. This process naturally reveals your inner attachments. Maybe it's not about the object, it's about what the object represents: control, status, protection, belonging. These become visible when you remove the thing that holds them, and when they're seen, they start to lose power. Minimalism, in its noble form, is not an aesthetic project. It's a spiritual one. It's not about having a clean house, it's about having a clear heart. You begin to understand that simplicity is not sterile. It's alive. It creates space for presence. It invites gratitude. It leaves room for rest. The less you hold, the less you fear losing. And when fear shrinks, the mind becomes available for beauty, for insight, for relationship. Noble poverty trains you to feel full without filling. One powerful way to explore this is to temporarily limit what you use. Choose fewer clothes, eat simpler meals, use fewer digital devices. Not forever, just long enough to see what happens. You'll notice what habits rise, what cravings surface, what fears speak. This reveals not just attachment to things, but to roles and patterns. Maybe you see how much of your identity is tied to what you wear, what you post, what you consume. This isn't judgment, it's awareness. When you see it, you have the power to change it. Noble poverty also softens the obsession with efficiency. When you stop needing to maximize every moment, you start inhabiting time instead of chasing it. Tasks become practices. Chores become rituals. Life stops being optimized and starts being lived. This also changes how you relate to others. Without the weight of needing to prove your worth, conversations become more honest. Relationships become less transactional. Generosity rises, not from overflow, but from balance. You share because you no longer believe giving will make you lack. In the deeper stages of this practice, you begin to detach from even internal clutter. Beliefs, labels, plans. You notice how often your mind leans on explanation, how you define yourself by what you've done, what you plan to do, how others perceive you. Noble poverty invites you to drop that too. You become less interested in appearing wise and more interested in being quiet. You don't need to say everything. You don't need to comment. Silence becomes strength, not emptiness. Even spiritual identity becomes visible as clutter. The need to be a practitioner, to hold a certain posture, to appear a certain way. Noble poverty dissolves that. You sit in your own presence, unembellished. That becomes enough. This practice also sharpens discernment. You stop saying yes to everything. You stop overcommitting. You realize that doing less often creates more impact, that having fewer obligations allows deeper focus. You begin to taste a different kind of wealth, the wealth of needing less, the freedom of inner sufficiency. Eventually, noble poverty becomes your ground, not because you reject the world, but because you relate to it differently. You enjoy beauty without needing to own it. You appreciate comfort without depending on it. You experience success without being defined by it. This way of living also brings resilience. When life changes, when things fall apart, you are less shaken. You've practiced letting go. You've trained in not clinging. You don't rely on external stability for inner peace. Noble poverty, practiced fully, becomes a form of devotion. You offer back to life what you never truly owned. You move gently, speak clearly, and rest often. You discover that the deepest presence does not shout. It whispers in the space you've made. So now, let the space open. Let the grip soften. Let the mind stop reaching. You are already enough. Let simplicity show you. Let presence complete you. And once simplicity has stripped the mind of false comfort, once the grip of identity softens and the space around every thought begins to feel like home, something else rises from within. Not a problem to fix or a role to perform, but the quiet realization that deep within the body, old impressions remain. Patterns that never spoke but always shaped you. Emotions held in muscle, story buried in breath. Not from this moment, but from many moments, long past, unprocessed, still waiting. And so begins a different kind of journey, not outward, inward, an inner pilgrimage. In Buddhist tantric systems, especially within Kala Chakra and related teachings, the body is seen not just as flesh, but as a vehicle of awareness, not a distraction from the path, but a map. Every energetic center is both a doorway and a mirror. The chakras, subtle energy hubs along the central channel, are not simply metaphysical ideas. They are focal points where the physical, emotional, and karmic layers of mind interact. When approached as a path of detox, the chakras are not just for balance, they are for purification. Each holds memory, each contains tendencies, and each must be consciously explored, not to control it, but to allow the tensions stored there to be seen and released. This process is not linear, it is layered. One insight at a time, one breath at a time, the knots begin to untie. You begin at the base, the root. In the Kala Chakra system, this area, located near the base of the spine, is associated with the most primal fears: survival, loss, grounding. It holds ancestral impressions, deep physical tension, and the belief that existence depends on control. As you bring awareness here, you don't try to fix anything. You breathe, you observe, you feel where the body tightens, where the mind resists. You may experience restlessness or stillness. Either is fine. Both are forms of release. Moving upward, you meet the sacral center, linked to emotion, pleasure, creation, but also attachment, guilt, and insecurity. In Buddhist frameworks, this is not about stimulation, but clarity. You observe where you seek comfort through escape, where desire controls your choices, where emotion clouds insight. This is not about denying feeling, it's about bringing presence to it. When attention rests here, the emotions begin to speak, not in drama, but in movement. You begin to feel what you've suppressed, and in that, healing begins. Above that is the solar plexus, the seat of identity and will, the part of the energy body that wants to do, to assert, to define. It's also where anger often hides, as well as shame. Here, you begin to see how often your strength has been confused with force. How many decisions come from proving rather than knowing. As you stay with breath in this center, power reorganizes. It no longer seeks control. It becomes inner alignment. When you feel clear here, action becomes effortless, not reactive, rooted. The heart center is next. Not sentiment, but balance. In Buddhist symbolism, the heart holds the bridge between wisdom and compassion. It's not emotionalism, it's the space where you meet everything without judgment. But before this center fully opens, It often reveals where you've been closed, past pain, grief, walls built for protection. Here, breath becomes essential. You allow what was never allowed, and in that gentle space, forgiveness enters, not as a concept, but as a softening. The throat follows, not just speech, but truth, expression, the gap between what you say and what you mean. Many hold silence here, not the wise kind, but the fearful kind. Words never spoken, feelings never voiced. The energy here often feels tight, hesitant. As you meditate in this area, you may feel the urge to cry or sigh or even hum. Let it happen. Sound is part of this purification. You do not force speech, you free it. The next center is the brow, not just intellect, but perception. This is where illusion often hides. False beliefs, rigid opinions, over-identification with thought. It is also where deep clarity arises. In the Kalachakra view, this is where the inner eye begins to open, not through visions, but through non-dual seeing. The purification here is not flashy. It is the release of mental arrogance. You stop needing to be right. You start seeing directly. Concepts loosen. Awareness sharpens. And finally, the crown. This is not a goal. It is a reminder that awareness is not trapped in the body, that identity is not bound to form. This center is connected to the wisdom of spaciousness, the recognition that the self is not a fixed entity. When this area is relaxed, the sense of separation weakens, not as an idea, as experience. You feel light, expansive, but not disconnected, present and whole. Moving through these centers is not a single practice, it is an ongoing return. Each time you bring attention to a center, something shifts, sometimes subtle, sometimes strong, but each breath clears another thread. Each session reveals another pattern. The body begins to feel less like a container and more like a field, open, alive, communicating. The purification is not only energetic, it is psychological, emotional, physical. You begin to feel which behaviors come from stored energy and which arise from clarity. You make decisions from inner silence, not reaction. You speak less, but when you do, it's clean. You also begin to notice which centers dominate you. Maybe you live too much in the head, avoiding the heart, or you react from the gut without listening to deeper insight. This awareness brings choice. You shift from imbalance to integration. Kalachakra teachings point to an inner alignment where all centers work together, not equally, but harmoniously. This is not achieved through effort. It arises through presence, through consistent, humble attention to the inner space. You can incorporate this work through body scan meditations, through breath directed into each center, through mantra resonating in the corresponding area. You can also bring mindfulness into movement, walking, stretching, sitting with awareness in specific points. No technique is required beyond sincerity. Over time, the mind begins to detox, not through force, through seeing. Old narratives fade. Emotional residue lifts. You feel lighter, not because you've escaped, but because you've faced what was inside. You are no longer carrying everything unconsciously. This is the essence of the inner pilgrimage. Not to go somewhere, but to return, to meet each layer of your being and clean it, not with judgment, but with breath. You stop asking why you feel blocked. You go to the place that holds the block and stay with it. You listen. And slowly, the system rewrites itself. You stop living from wounds. You stop reacting from old fear. You stop identifying with every mood. You become aligned, not in posture, but in presence. So now, close the outer world. Let attention turn inward. One center at a time. No rush, no analysis. Just breath. Just awareness. And the map unfolds. And once the inner landscape has been walked with breath, once the chakras have been cleared not through force but through deep listening, a softer clarity begins to settle. But some patterns do not dissolve through presence alone. Some impressions lie hidden beneath words, tangled in memory, held too tightly to be named. They need more than awareness. They need release. They need form. They need to be made visible before they can let go. This is where ritual offering becomes a doorway. In Tibetan Buddhist practice, the torma is one of the most powerful and underestimated tools for psychological and energetic release. A torma is a physical object, usually made of barley flour or butter, shaped and dedicated during ritual. But it is far more than a symbol. It becomes a container. It absorbs intention. It takes on what cannot be held inside anymore. The essence of this practice lies in one simple truth. The human mind needs mirrors, not only to see itself, but to transform. Just as speaking brings clarity to what was vague, creating an offering gives shape to pain that's otherwise formless. This is not intellectual. It is somatic, emotional, energetic. In this ritual, you do not merely visualize letting go. You shape it, you name it, you touch it. And then, in a precise and respectful act, you release it. Not because it's bad, but because it has served its purpose. The process begins with intention. Before any object is made, the practitioner clarifies what is being offered. This is not about material wealth or generosity in the worldly sense. It is about making space. What are you ready to let go of? What no longer supports your path? What pain are you ready to stop identifying with? That pain is then transferred, not mentally but symbolically, into the offering. In traditional settings, this may be a shaped cake, a pile of food, or even a stick figure. In personal practice, it can be anything made with care. A folded paper, a molded form, even a stone selected from the earth. The point is not what it is made from. The point is what it carries. As you build the torma, you pour into it the energy you're ready to release. Shame, fear, resentment, even joy that has nowhere to go. You give it shape. You allow your hands to speak for your heart. This movement turns emotion into action. Suddenly, it's not just an idea. It's right in front of you. This act alone begins to loosen the hold. The pain is no longer part of the body. It has been externalized. Now it can be honored. The torma is not thrown away in anger. It is offered with care, often accompanied by mantra, gesture, and visualization. Traditionally, the offering is given to specific figures, demons, protectors, hungry ghosts, not because they are literal beings, but because they represent aspects of the psyche and energy body. When you give to them, you are not feeding darkness. You are feeding the part of you that never felt seen, the one that has been pushed aside. The offering once made is destroyed, burned, buried, released into water or left for animals. This destruction is not violence. It is liberation. It affirms that you do not need to hold what has already been met. You trusted it into form, now you trust it into dissolution. What remains afterward is often surprising. Lightness, relief, sometimes grief. A hollow space where the burden used to be. This emptiness is sacred. It is not lack, it is readiness. You do not rush to fill it, you allow it to stay open. With repetition, this practice builds trust, not in the ritual itself, but in your own capacity to release. The mind learns that not every emotion must be carried forever. The body learns that tension can leave. The heart learns that space is safe. This practice also respects the nervous system. Some emotions are too intense to process mentally, but when shaped and offered, they begin to move. You don't need to analyze trauma to start healing it. You can place it in the trauma. Let the fire transform what the mind cannot. There is also a collective dimension to this ritual. In group settings, offerings can be made for the suffering of others. A shared trauma can hold communal grief, ancestral patterns, or cultural wounds. The act of witnessing another's release deepens your own. You remember that pain is not personal. It is part of the human field. When practiced over time, trauma offering changes your relationship to suffering. You no longer see pain as a sign of failure. You see it as something to be honored, touched, and offered. You stop hiding it. You stop fearing its return. You understand that whatever arises can be given to the fire. In daily life, this becomes a mindset. You begin to live more openly. When something disturbs you, you ask, can I make an offering of this? Can I name it, hold it, and release it? Even without the physical ritual, the internal gesture remains. You stop accumulating. You start releasing. The ritual also deepens humility. You see that transformation doesn't come from force. It comes from willingness, from making room, from letting go of what no longer belongs. You stop needing to explain your pain. You simply offer it. And slowly, the psyche begins to rewire. Not toward avoidance, but toward trust. You trust your capacity to feel, to name, to create, to release. This is not bypassing. This is alchemy. Each trauma becomes a page in a sacred journal, a history of what you've lived through, what you've survived, and what you've learned to carry differently. So now, if something inside feels heavy, don't push it away. Shape it. Honor it. Let it speak through your hands. And when the time comes, offer it with care. Let fire or earth or wind take it, and sit with the space that follows. And after the offering is made and the weight has been released into fire, wind, or earth, the space that opens is not empty. It is vivid, not with thought, but with tone, texture, feeling, a kind of inner atmosphere that wasn't there before, or maybe was always there, but buried under what has now been given away. This is when you begin to notice not just silence, not just stillness, but hue, the subtle presence of color in the body and mind, not as decoration, but as vibration, a language deeper than words. In Buddhist esoteric practice, color is not visual flair. It is energy. It is information. It is transformation. Used especially in deity yoga and tantric visualization, each color is linked with a psychological state, an energetic frequency, and a form of wisdom. These are not symbolic generalizations. They are experiential tools. When you meditate with these colors, they change how your system processes emotion, how your mind organizes thought, and how your awareness responds to challenge. Color enters meditation in two primary ways: visualization and absorption. You either visualize light or forms of a certain color, or you let yourself rest in the feeling tone that color holds. This is not fantasy. It's a way of engaging the nervous system directly, of shifting emotional habits without argument or suppression. The most well-known example is blue. In Vajrayana Buddhism, deep blue is associated with wrathful deities, figures that embody fierce compassion, the energy that cuts through illusion without hesitation. But this blue isn't the cold of detachment. It's the clarity that sees without fear. Meditating on this color invites the mind into stillness, not soft stillness, but sharp stillness. Like sky before a storm, like a blade that doesn't cut but reveals. Sitting with blue can help interrupt patterns of panic or confusion. It clears mental fog, reduces internal chaos, and supports boundaries. The more clearly you see, the less you need to control. You begin to trust space, not blank space, but intelligent space. White is linked to purity, openness, and expansive awareness. It is used when practicing release, forgiveness, or dissolving attachments. It doesn't stimulate, it clarifies. Meditating with white light helps you rest the mind, not by numbing, but by neutralizing extremes. You soften your position, you open the field, you let things pass without grabbing. White also connects to the crown center, symbolic of connection to what cannot be named. It teaches you how to receive, how to be with not knowing without stress. This is not erasure of identity. It's what remains when identity isn't held so tightly. Red, on the other hand, is vitality. It's the warmth of presence, the heat of connection. But in the esoteric framework, it isn't tied to craving. When used skillfully, red grounds you in the present. It supports the heart. It awakens energy that is direct but not aggressive. In deity practices, red is often linked to deities of magnetism, those who draw beings toward the path through love, beauty, and joy. Meditation on red doesn't make you impulsive. It returns you to a sense of aliveness that doesn't need stimulation. It helps you contact the part of you that can feel deeply without drowning. Yellow is often associated with equanimity and learning. It supports stable clarity, mental presence that is alert without being tense. In Buddhist color psychology, yellow helps with digestion, literal and psychological. It assists in transforming confusion into insight, the kind of clarity that arises not from effort, but from consistency, from warmth, from the middle path. It's also used to stabilize mood swings and lessen mental distraction. Sitting with yellow allows you to process information without being overwhelmed. It helps turn intellectual clutter into simple knowing. Green represents action from compassion. It's the color of the heart in movement, not just feeling for others, but acting on behalf of them. It's the vibration of growth, of movement through blocks, of transformation that's aligned with care. Green in meditation helps you stay in touch with others without merging. It keeps you open but centered. In deity yoga, green Tara embodies this quality. She acts quickly, but never in haste. Her energy is immediate, but never violent. Meditating on green helps you move when it's time to move, without force. These 5 colors, blue, white, red, yellow, and green, make up the core of the 5 Buddha families in tantric systems. Each family corresponds to a poison and its transmuted wisdom. Each color becomes a tool for working with a particular affliction. Blue transforms anger into mirror-like wisdom. Red transforms desire into discriminating awareness. Yellow transforms pride into equanimity. Green transforms jealousy into all-accomplishing wisdom. White transforms ignorance into spacious knowing. These are not abstract claims, they are methods. When you meditate with a color consistently, your system starts to shift. You're not just thinking differently, you're perceiving from a new place. The body feels different. The breath changes pace. The mind stops spinning. To begin, you don't need to memorize every association. You simply pick one color that feels intuitively right. Sit quietly. Visualize light of that color filling the body. Let it move with the breath. Let it wash through tension. Let it speak to the part of you that doesn't use words. You can also work with color based on need. If your mind feels sharp and reactive, sit with blue. If you're exhausted and ungrounded, sit with red. If you feel closed and defensive, rest with white. If you're overwhelmed by input, sit with yellow. If your compassion feels drained, sit with green. Over time, the body-mind begins to associate these states with the visual tone. Eventually, just remembering the color shifts your state. It becomes an anchor, a signal, a form of psychological hygiene. In advanced practice, color can be used in mantra recitation, where sound and color move together. The seed syllables of certain deities are visualized in corresponding hues, resonating in specific centers of the body. This creates a whole-body recalibration. Sound penetrates, color stabilizes. Together, they shift the mind beyond words. This is also a powerful way to clean psychic residue. Experiences that leave emotional or energetic traces can be gently processed using specific color meditations. Instead of analyzing the memory, you bring it into the light of the appropriate color. You breathe it through. You feel it lose its charge. Color works where logic cannot. It communicates with the part of you that holds memory in image, in tone, in sensation. It speaks to trauma, to habit, to mood, not by explanation, but by frequency. This is not passive, it is an engaged meditation. You remain aware, but you let the color lead. You let the psyche realign itself. You let balance return not by will, but by resonance. With consistent practice, color becomes part of your inner vocabulary. You learn to diagnose imbalance not just by mood, but by energetic tone. You begin to sense which aspect of yourself needs attention, and you meet it with the appropriate frequency. The purpose is not to chase ideal states. It is to return to balance, to re-establish flow, to soften what has hardened, to awaken what has gone dull. Each color becomes a doorway, simple, elegant, direct. So now, let the mind quiet. Let thought slow, and see what color calls you today. Let it fill the body. Let it touch the breath. Let it teach you without saying a word. You've now traveled through hours of teachings, not just ideas, but inner tools. from Zen koans that dissolve mental loops to the silent spaciousness between thoughts. From chanting that rewires emotion to elemental meditations that free the body's memory. From death contemplations to deity visualizations, from the energetic pulse of color to the fearlessness of offering yourself to the unknown, every layer was here for one reason: to return you to what you've never lost. This wasn't a lesson in beliefs. It was a path back to presence. Because real strength doesn't come from control, it comes from letting go. Real peace doesn't come from escape. It comes from turning inward, again and again, until the walls fall, and what remains is still, open and untouchable. If even one part of this journey spoke to something in you, leave a comment below. Write, "I'm on the path," to let me know you're walking it too. And if you want to keep training the heart and mind while you sleep or while fully awake, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's more ahead, and we walk it together. Until next time, rest deeply, wake wisely, and carry this stillness with you.